testifying, you should remain seated in the audience. We have plenty of open chairs tonight. Okay, I think I've about said all the things I have to say. June, do you want to? Oh, you have it. Okay. All right, we're going to begin public testimony now. No, that'd be fine. Representative, yes. Representative Van Scoit, you're recognized to make a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, welcome to North Missouri. I would say welcome to the great Northwest, but we're in the Northeast, so welcome to Northeast Missouri. Representative Riggs back there waving his hand. We're glad you're here. We've got people from all over North Missouri here to testify tonight. Office holders and public as well here to testify to this committee. We thank you all for being here. We thank the State Tax Commission for being here. You've been to every meeting we've had. We appreciate that very much. North Missouri is predominantly third-class counties. In the state of Missouri, there are 93 out of the 114 counties are third or fourth-class counties. North Missouri contains the smallest county in population, Worth County, with less than 2,000 people. Counties having right around 5,000 or less are Atchison, Holt, Mercer, Putnam, Schuyler, Scotland, and Knox. We've got a lot of small counties. We're proud of our counties. We're proud of the work they do. We're proud of our fire boards, our ambulance boards, our Senate Bill 40 boards. We provide the same services in our counties that are provided for most people in first class and charter counties, just on a smaller scale. We like to keep that going. We like to keep our identity and our counties going. So we thank the committee for being here tonight and welcome you to North Missouri. If you've not been here before, welcome if you have, and please be sure and come back again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rep. Thank you, Rep. You lose it already. There it is. Okay. Mike, do you have to turn any of these mics on?
Yeah, I'm turning them on off as we go.
Okay. So just keep that in mind, committee members, if he's running the switch back there. If he shuts you off while you're in mid-sentence, it wasn't any of my doing, all right? I want you to know that. So. All right. Looks like we have about one full sheet, so that's going to be about 20 witnesses that have signed up thus far. So we have asked, I have asked, that when you come up here, we all have complaints about our taxes. We want to hear your complaints, what's happening to you, what you see as the problem. I've also asked that if you can, we want, we have many of the same problems all across the state. We want to hear from you about what you think a potential solution may be. So when you come up here, you may be asked, what do you think will fix that? So be forthcoming with your thoughts. We really would appreciate that. We are just normal citizens sitting up here, and we've gotten a lot more educated on this process through the process, but we still have a lot to learn as well. So I know there are people in this audience tonight who are going to help forward our education. I look forward to hearing from them. Having said that, the very first person I'm calling on is Darren Gladback. Now on deck, I will give you all the on deck person so that person can get ready, and that's Tony Smee is on deck. Please introduce yourself, tell us who you represent, and move forward.
Thank you. I might ask permission to go prepare more notes because I was prepared to talk for 3 minutes, but it sounds like I can talk longer than I want to. So I am Darren Gladback. I'm the assessor from Sheridan County, Missouri. I've served there for 24 years. I want to extremely thank you all for coming out here to rural Missouri and giving us a chance to be a part of this process and come in our backyards to hear what we have to say. Having said that, I would ask that whenever you all do legislation, please reach out to us in the courthouses. There's vast experience out here in the courthouses. In our particular county, between myself, the county clerk, and the county collector, we have over 100 years of experience in that office, not necessarily elected to it, but we've been there. So when we're going to try to pass legislation that has to be implemented at the county level, let's reach out to those people and see how it's going to work, if it can be implemented, how much of a process it's going to be implemented. We have great programs intact. One of those is a circuit breaker program, which was an excellent program that was based on income and age, and that was an excellent program that should be looked at expanding maybe rather than freezing certain areas, because when we freeze an area, the ones left in the pool pick up the slack, because we've got these fire districts and ambulance districts and stuff out here in rural Missouri, and the cost to fund them is not going down. And it's not for mismanagement, it's just the cost of doing business. And we got to fund those locally, and if we decrease that pool, the ones that's left in the pool is going to pick up more of the burden. So we need to keep that in the back of our minds. Like I say, these are personal property taxes is one thing that I guess I'm more of an expert in because that's what I deal with. And you can look out your window and see where their penny of that's being spent. None of that is going to Washington, D.C. or Jeff City. I guess 2 cents of the blind pension fund is, but that's a very small portion. The rest of that's being spent here. So you have every right to get on those boards, to vote against or for those levies when they run them. That's your organization, your place to step up and take control of that local money because it's services that we do need. As far as the assessment process, there's 4 subclasses of property. There's personal property taxes, there's personal property subclass, residential subclass, agriculture subclass, and the 4th class is commercial or anything that does not fit in the other ones. Here in rural Missouri, most counties, the residential subclass does not make up any more than 20 or 25% of the total assessed valuation. Having said that, if that's the only subclass that gets raised in value, it cannot trigger enough of an increase overall to trigger any rollbacks. That's why we need rollbacks. That's why we need levies for each subclass. So each subclass has its own burden. What has happened in the past is the residential subclass, that valuation keeps going up. So the overall valuation does not go up enough to trigger a rollback. If it does trigger a rollback, all the other subclasses also benefit from that rollback. We are scared of large increases in valuation. In reality, that's what we want because a large increase will trigger more of a rollback. If you keep on just raising the residential 5% or 3% every 2 years, the overall valuation will move up hardly any and trigger no rollbacks. If you raise it 25, 30%, it should, if the rollback process works like it should roll back to where your taxes should only go up 2 or 3%. Then those tax entities have the ability to go to the people, ask them to vote for their taxes, their levy to go back up. If the people vote to do that, they now have a larger tax base to base that on. So, and my understanding is that legislation was put into effect several years ago, but the counties was given the option to opt out of it, and most counties opted out of that because they didn't want to multiply their levies by 5 or by 4 in the county. State Tax Commission is with us tonight. They're a fine organization. They're a viable organization. They need to be there to keep things fair and equitable amongst counties. If we had no tax entities that cross county lines, it wouldn't be much of an issue. But we have school districts out here in the state of Missouri crossing county lines all the time. So if my county's at 50% of value, another county's at 100, that's not the same burden on each school district. Having said that, the Tax Commission do have their issues they need to address. One is the valuation of the ag land in the state of Missouri. Ag land is valued at its productive value, not its market value. It's also at 12% of its value, whereas everything else is 19 or 32, which you probably know that. There's a study done, but the production value of agricultural land in the state of Missouri today is less than it was in 1985. The study that's done by the University of Missouri says that it needs to triple in value. And triple's a big word, but in a lot of this situation, it would go from $1 an acre to $3 an acre. But that's, as far as fairness, if you do a ratio on ag land, it's about 30%. On the state assessed companies, am I out of time already? On the state assessed companies, they are also valued by the state of Missouri. The valuation of these companies are hard to come up with the value for these companies. They do not sell every day. We're fortunate enough now to have, it's just one number, but the Union Pacific is in the process of acquiring the North Fork and Southern Railroad. In those publications, they say the value of the North Fork and Southern Railroad is $85 billion. The state tax commission has got they're valuing that North Fork and Southern Railroad nationwide before they start their process at $19.4 billion, less than 25% ratio. But yet the residential is expected to be at 90%. Several years ago in Sheridan County, we had a small pipeline running through our county. These pipelines, these state assessed companies, they're state assessed, but they have local things that are assessed locally. That's the vehicles or stuff that is not involved with the carrying of the product. So each county is allowed to assess their local stuff. It's subtracted from the total, and then the net is divided up per mile to each county. Is considered distributable property. We did not get anything with this pipeline one year. I was asking my county clerk why we didn't get any value from that pipeline. We called Jeff City and checked into it, and their response was that 2 counties in the state of Missouri had valued the vehicles at more than what the state had on the entire company, so there was nothing left to distribute. There's also another instance, another big thing the State Tax Commission has the responsibility of doing is hearing appeals and settling those appeals where people think they've been overassessed. There's a situation in southern Missouri where they have a mine that the county had valued at $114 million. They hired a professional appraiser in that field, and he valued it at $112 million. The hearing officer valued that at $18 million, and the State Tax Commission upheld that ruling. So these are some, I mean, nobody can have a perfect situation, but these are some instances to where not all property is being assessed at the 90% level that residential is being held to. I will entertain any questions that you feel like asking.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your testimony. Thanks for coming. For those of you all who don't know, Sheridan County is the northernmost county in my district. So you and I have had good conversations for a long time now. Tell me the number again about the railroad and the value of that railroad, and then what the low number was?
The railroad, according to what was published, the valuation for the railroad on the merger was $85 billion. For the state of Missouri to value these companies per mile within the state, they have to go out and find the total value of that company. Then they back that up to what the value is in Missouri. They get a total value per mile overall, and they back that up to what the valuation is in Missouri. The number they started with the total value for the company, was $19.4 billion.
Right. So the starting point was exceptionally low.
Yes, I mean, in a perfect world, the $19.4 billion says what the market value of that company is.
Have you taken the time to digest what that difference means to Sheridan County and what that number would look like as far as if it were done differently, properly, if you will, what
Well,
kind of dollar figure?
number one, you don't know how much stuff is included in that 85 that isn't true. I mean, is the true value of that company only 50?
Right.
They put a lot of fluff in that. No, I have not. I mean, even if it was valued at, even if it's valued like at 40 million, it would still need to, the valuation would double. Now, if the rollbacks work like they were supposed to, that particular railroad would double, and then it would roll everybody back a little bit,
Right.
So you wouldn't be able to recoup a lot of money from that. But it just goes to show that it's pretty hard to attain that 90% level across all subclasses
Right.
of property.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Representative Harbison, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate it. I represent 7 counties in southeast Missouri, and that mine's in my district you referred to. Our state is unique and diverse. Has your association sent any suggestions, the Assessors Association, to this committee or prior to maybe years when there was other committees? Has there been any written suggestions on some of these fixes I appreciate you coming today and shedding light on a lot of this. I have 3 assessors in my district that have over 100 years between the 3 of them. They've been a wealth of knowledge for me, and I thank them for what they've done. But is the association as a whole, have you seen any solutions, possible solutions to this committee or prior committees?
We have a legislative chair that is very active in testifying in Jeff City, and we as a, well, I'm talking to myself as myself, but I've been a past president of the association. We are very big proponents of the multiple levy system and to getting the rollbacks fixed and visiting the school's minimum levy and the debt service to schools and looking into those issues. I mean, our view as assessors is the assessor should not be one man out here raising taxes. We have no problem putting the assessed valuation on what stuff needs to be, but it needs to roll back where it's a 2 or 3% or where GDP is GP growth, or get my initials messed up. But anyway, whatever that growth is, we're fine with that. And after that, you roll the taxes back, and then those entities go back to the people. If the people vote to raise the levies, great. I mean, if we could put the assessed valuation where it needs to be, then you can run that 25-cent levy instead of the 50-cent levy to create the same revenue. But we got to have that. We can't be that one person out there as a revenue source.
Thank you for coming today, and thank you for coming today and testifying. We appreciate your input and anything in the future.
Thank you.
Representative Boyko, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you, and I appreciate the testimony. We've heard from a lot of assessors, as you can imagine, and I think to the assessor, they all care about getting an accurate and fair valuation, just like you do, so I appreciate that. And I heard a lot about suggestions, some great suggestions in terms of getting a fair valuation. I want to go back to accuracy. Do you consider that you have any particular trouble or obstacle that stands in the way from your ability to get an accurate valuation of a particular parcel of property?
You mean, do I have a problem receiving the sales information back? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, in other words, is there an impediment, particularly a state law that we could impact, that makes your job more difficult when you're trying to come up with what the market value or the taxable value of the property is?
I don't think getting the valuation of the property is near as important as fixing the rollback and the levy situation where we're not. You know, if we raise your assessed valuation 15, 20% or whatever, as long as your tax bill only increases by 2 or 3%, that's the goal we want to get to. And if we can't get there, then we have a problem doing our job because, you know, we don't want to be that one person out there that's raising your taxes. And that's more of an issue in rural Missouri. You take your St. Louis and Jackson County, and no offense at all to that, but 90% of their valuation in those areas, some of those areas are residential. So it works more like it's supposed to. You get out here in rural America, it's more diversified. So therefore, you got to raise all the classes to get that evaluation up to trigger the rollback situation. That's why we're proponents of the multiple levies.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Chappell, you are recognized to inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, sir, for being here this evening. I'm not making any application to you or your office when I ask what I'm about to ask.
Fine.
What are the consequences for an assessment that is overassessed? What negatives are imposed on the assessor's office to discourage overassessment in the state of Missouri?
Well, the person has every right to, they have every right to their appeal process. And then once they prove that their value is too high you have the Board of Equalization at the county level that you bring your information to. Then if they don't like that decision, then they can appeal to the hearing officer of the State Tax Commission, and then the State Tax Commissioners they either override or overrule or uphold the hearing officer, then you go to circuit court, so the appeal process. As far as if it shows up on paper being overassessed, the fact is, if you're going to stay at 90%, above 90% of value, you're going to have some properties overassessed, or you're not going to be at 90%. because you're getting the median.
So, wow. So what I'm hearing is you're describing the way in which the citizen can contest the assessment, but what I'm asking is, what are the negative consequences for an assessment process wherein an assessor or one of the assessor staff has gone amok and assessed highly on a property? What negative, I know what the negative consequences are when an officer doesn't follow protocol and doesn't follow the law. I know what happens to other governmental employees when they don't follow protocol and don't follow the law. I'm asking, what's the negative consequence to an assessor that is not yielding to the true value in money of a property, but is assessing far beyond that? What's the negative ramification?
The reelection process would be my answer. You'd be a one-termer. I mean, that word. I mean, I guess I can't speak for the large jurisdictions, but most small jurisdictions, if it's not a property that's severely run down or has got severe problems that the assessor doesn't know about, there's not an overassessment process. And I don't know of any assessor that if somebody comes to their office and says, listen, my basement wall's caving in, this and this is going on, they'll go take a look at it. Because out here in rural America, when you're the assessor, you never get away from it. When you go to church, when you go to the grocery store, they know who you are, where you are, and you get the questions.
Trust me, I know. I'm right there with you. So when are the elections for assessor held in the counties?
Every 4 years.
But what time of year?
They're in November.
They are in November?
November at the
Yeah.
presidential election, and then we take office on September 1st. but
Sure.
we're elected in November.
Sure, okay. And I think that's a distinction that needs to be made, the smaller, more rural settings versus the larger jurisdictions. I'm not sure it plays out that way in the bigger areas, but I just don't see any legal ramifications to discourage overassessment other than for the assessor himself or herself. The staff, and there's nothing in the law that says if you do this.
There again, we've got that big break between the large counties and the small counties. In the small counties, we as assessors pretty much know what's going on because, like I say, we're asked about it every day. The larger counties are more so administrators, and maybe they got a larger staff and they can't have their thumb on it like we have the privilege in the smaller jurisdictions.
All right, sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, gentlemen, thank you for coming up and talking.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, I think, Tony, you're up next, and then on deck, Darlene Shipp, you're on deck. So please introduce yourself.
Thank
Tell us who you are. And
Chairman and Vice Chairman. My name is Tony Smee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you this evening. I'm here actually at the suggestion of my State Representative John Voss in District 147. John and I had lunch a couple weeks ago and spent 2.5 hours, his choice, not mine, talking about the different parts of the tax issues that we have going on here. And, you know, I appreciate the enormity of the issue, and I've worked in it, and I've been involved in multiple aspects of this issue for about 20 years. I served 12 years on the Board of Education, 4 terms in Cape Girardeau Public Schools. I was a master certified board member there. I have a lot of time. I served as chief appraiser for the Cape Girardeau County Assessor. I was responsible personally for preparing the annual assessment rolls, the annual reassessment plans, our appraisal staff, our centrally assessed railroad and utility property submittals. Prior to leaving, I was a candidate for the assessment administration specialist, and I'm not telling you that to brag, but I want to give you a background on me. Most recently, I served as director of the St. Louis County Department of Revenue, overseeing the collection and distribution of almost $3 billion on behalf of 245 taxing authorities. We issued 1 million tax bills between personal property and real estate. But I'm a Southeast Missouri boy. I live in Cape Girardeau now. I'm no longer in St. Louis County. But as you can see, I've touched all the different elements in this process. And what I do know is that a lot of times the participants in this process truly only understand their piece of it. You know, there was an article, and Chairman Taylor talked about it just being too complicated. And the reality is it's a bit complicated, but it's more than that. It's really interdependent. And so it's very important that we get things right. And Assessor Darren, you know, who I knew from my time with the assessor's office, made some very, very good points and the issues that the assessors are faced with. One of the things I want to touch on is, contrary to popular belief and what I've heard in other sessions, is that there's this massive case of taxing districts not rolling back rates, and we've got data that shows that that's just not the case. There are some issues, and there are some technicalities and Prop C stuff and all kinds of things that go into how taxing districts set their rates that people don't understand and they don't know, or they've heard about it in another county, and so they say something that may or may not be true in this county, or it may not pertain to them because of the size of their district or how their county is set up. And so there's all kinds of things that are being kind of tossed about that may or may not be true. At its foundation, Missouri's property tax system depends on one key factor, and that's an accurate roll of all taxable property in the counties. And Darren talked about that as well. Now, because assessors have to update that roll every 2 years, they have to use what's called mass appraisal. And, you know, going back to one of the former members' questions about having an overassessed property, it's been my experience that you're almost never at an overassessed property unless you've got a property that has had some damage, something that negatively impacts that. And so in Cape Girardeau County, for instance, when I was there, we had 44,000 parcels. St. Louis County has 440,000 parcels. Now, I don't care how much funding you have, you can't get out and do an appraisal in each of those properties every year. And so you have to use a mass appraisal, and there's where this percentage stuff comes in. The counties that have the time and the ability and the financing to go in and study the markets, or they actually even have sales to do a market study, can go in and say, well, you know what, we believe that all of our residential properties probably went up 6% this year. And that's great if you have that data. And the assessor, if they have the ability, if they have software that's updated, they can apply that 6% to all properties in that county. Is that going to be accurate for every property? No. I've got counties in Cape Girardeau that went up 20% in the last 2 years. We have sales data that show that house resold within 2 years at a 20% higher value, right? That's not going to be the same for necessarily the neighborhood that I live in. My house was built in 1965. So, you know, there's all these kinds of issues that assessors have to be faced with, and it's because they have to deal with the parcels in mass that we have the difficulties that we have. And if they have to go in every 2 years and only assess a portion of their county because that's all they have the resources for, they may reassess a portion of the county at 8%, but the remainder of the county doesn't get any reassessment. Well, all these folks, because it doesn't, again, going back to the rollback, it doesn't trigger Hancock rollback provisions. There's no reduction in levy. So all these people that got a reassessment at 8%, they're going to have an 8% higher tax. All these people that didn't are going to have no increase in tax. And the real issue is, and you may have heard this, you may have heard reassessment alluded to in the past. In the early 80s, the state mandated a complete reassessment of the entire state to reset all of the property value. And that's exactly what needs to happen, because not only are we having folks that are being taxed at twice what they should be. You know, again, my house was built in 1965. I guarantee you I'm underassessed. With the value of my house across town in a new house, for instance, is going to be assessed at really close to market value because it's a brand new build and they know what the data was and they know what that house cost. Well, they're probably paying $4,000 a year in taxes where I'm paying $2,000 a year, but our houses are probably the same value. If you did a complete reassessment and you revalued all of that property, you're going to lower that value and that tax for the person that has that $400,000 new house, right? And you're going to increase a little bit the others that have been on the books and have had that advantage for having a low tax all that time. So you're bringing fairness into scope there. You would also capture a lot of property that's not on the tax rolls because the assessor hasn't had the ability or the resources to go out and actually do a physical inspection of all of the properties in their county, and it is a huge task. And I'm gonna provide these notes here, and I'm in the respect of the time. I'm not going to go into everything I've got here, but what I would like to say is that when COVID area property values surged, some homeowners saw double-digit increases while others saw none, creating severe inequities within counties. And that's, I think, frankly, why we're here today. only funding that reassessment and helping assessors with that and maintaining those standards county to county, that's the only way that this is going to be fixed. All these other things, the caps, the freezes, that's not going to do anything to fix your inequities. Until you know what property is taxable that's in your county and what that base of value is, there's no way you're going to be able to do any positive effect on levies. So I'm getting the yellow flag here. I just urge the committee, and I'm here just to say, hey, there's all kinds of things that go into this. We already have a thoughtfully designed but poorly maintained tax system. Instead of new laws, we need to fund the existing laws and processes. The Tax Commission needs to give the support to the assessors that they deserve. And please invite stakeholders from all these groups to have a hand in working on this process. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Don't run away. Part of my flagging you was that you've developed some questions here that we want to ask of you.
Sure.
And we don't want to take too much time. What is your thoughts about changing the 2-year assessment time period to something longer, farther out?
Well, so from a practical standpoint, say I was in that position to do it. If we were committed to do it and we had the resource to actually do the reassessment during that 4 years, I think it would be a positive thing. Now, is it going to be like it is now? We have 2 years to develop, those reappraisals. You're still not going to, even if you had 4 years, be able to reappraise every property in your county. Even, when I was in Cape Girardeau County, 44,000 parcels is a ton of parcels, right? And we're still not going to get out and do a full, but we're fortunate we had a certified appraiser in the office, 2 certified appraisers in the office, right? Some counties don't, they just don't have people to go out and do that. But, and if you could develop additional sales data from that over that 4-year period of time, maybe that's something to think about. Now, I can't advocate for that without understanding what impact it might have to taxing jurisdictions.
The thought is that maybe we'll get a longer period of time would allow for crazy swings in the market to be evenly dispersed across longer years?
Well, you would have to go back and determine what your valuation date would be. Right now it's pretty specified. You'd have to go back and do all that over again and determine what date are you going to use. Well, maybe you've had a recession 6 months from the end of that 4-year period, right? But is that 2 or 3%, 4% drop in the market enough to negate maybe a 10 or 12% increase over that period of 4 years? You'll have people coming in complaining, well, my house value went down 4% this year. Well, but it rose 14% the 3 years prior. I think you're just trading, you're trading issues. Right. I think you didn't ask me this question, but I think one of the options could be to freeze values while you're going through a mandated reassessment. Right? Like reset, say, okay, we're starting right here. We're going to give 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, and we're going to fund you, appropriately to go out and do this. We're going to help you get resources, and we're going to train you to go out and get these assessments done, and we're going to reset. We're going to look at all the levy calculations. We're going to invite the taxing jurisdictions as stakeholders in to do this and see what the impact's going to be, because it's math. And, that's what all this is. If you know what the parts of the process are, as long as they're done properly the way they're supposed to be, and that's where it's broken.
I appreciate your insight. Thank you. Representative Keithley, you were recognized to inquire.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You had said that you believe that the rollbacks are happening in compliance with the levy. I want to understand exactly what you're saying there, because there's 2 different things I think that may be being said there. Are you contending that the rollbacks are happening, that the rollbacks are happening in compliance with law? Or are you actually contending that property tax bills and tax levies are not actually going up more than the 5% or CPI?
No, I didn't say that at all. And it's all math. This is not, it's a known thing. And there's a comment in here about showing you guys the math later, but the levy calculations are prescribed on a form that gets submitted to the state auditor's office. They use as the base value the assessor's, property value that comes from the assessor's office. That's filed with the county clerk. It's sent to the state auditor. If it's wrong, the auditor's going to kick it back. They can't set the levy if the auditor says that it's not correct.
Right, and I've read those reports.
Yeah.
The issue is, and I'm not saying it's a problem in every county, it's certainly a problem in my county and some counties. I don't think it's a problem in every county, to be clear. I think I think by and large, most counties are doing it right, but we do have some issues where I'm not saying that the auditor's office is kicking back higher rates than what it is.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, and I've been one of the ones who makes this contention over and over again, that the 5% is not offering taxpayers any real meaningful protection anymore. Because, well, one, it doesn't apply to the debt servicing, and the increase in debt service funds is a way around it. In some cases, there's major school districts that don't even apply the levy at all, don't have to apply the levy at all. But then when you decrease other areas, that 5% applies to the revenue as a whole. So it protects the county on the 5%, but doesn't protect individual property owners. Because the one thing I don't think that, we can say whatever we want about the 5% of the rates, we can say, well, we're following the auditors. But I think that is happening. I think the problem is that between running no tax rate increase ballot proposals onto April ballots with low turnout and telling voters there's no tax rate increase when they were due a tax rate decrease, including the constant renewal of debt servicing, the disparity in how far some properties go down to others. What is happening is, I think in some cases these revenues are, and property abatement, that still gets calculated into the total revenue guaranteed. The one thing I think is happening is that in some counties, again, not all, that they are some taxing districts are recouping way more than the 5% cap they're supposed to have under Hancock. But what I know is for sure, that I think is happening, what I know for sure is happening is that individual taxpayers are seeing in a lot of cases much larger than 5% increases on their individual tax
Absolutely.
bills.
And that goes back to being able to properly reassess the entire, so not even say county, but it's that rollback. It's 5% or CPI, whichever's highest. So if you go back to 1986, we've only had like 4 years where it's been over like 3.5%. So typically CPI, rate of inflation, has been sub 3% each year, right? So had we been doing assessments that kept up with inflation as an aggregate, so the entire school district has to go up above 5% or CPI to roll back levy. So again, if an assessor only goes out and maybe he raises values 12% on residential.
The rate has to come down to correspond with it.
No, only if it brings the aggregate, the total
Right,
assessed
yeah.
valuation for that district up over.
Which means some people will still go up at that 12%,
Right.
and we're going up at different rates. I think that's what I'm
Right.
trying to understand, because you're saying, well, the rates are, and I think I
Sure.
agree with you
Yeah.
in that I'm not saying that any specific taxing jurisdiction is violating the rates that the auditor's office is supplying. What I do think is happening is I think those rates are being gamed by the taxing jurisdictions in some cases to find loopholes where they're not subject to those CPIs.
Well, I appreciate that thought, and I understand, and I've heard that language, and it's a common perception and a common misperception depending upon where you look at that. There are laws that govern very specifically how those are done. And I'm not the expert on that. I know experts on that, right? As a part of a board, we were subject to, for 12 years, tax rate hearings, right, where we were explained by our school finance officials about what those different impacts would have. And they were open to the public. In the 12 years that I was there, we had 2 years where we had members of the public come to a tax rate hearing, and they were at night, just right before our regular board meetings. The 2 years that we had people come, they were scouts working on their citizenship in the community merit badge, right? So nobody was there to talk about and to understand why the districts themselves were making those changes. Now, you may not agree, or somebody in the public may not agree that they're going to change their debt service levy up to the cap. But the caps, and especially the operating cap, the taxpayers voted on that at some point in time in the past. The taxpayers
Well,
said,
4% of the taxpayers, 10% if it's in an
whatever it
April
is. I
election.
mean, but
I just want to be clear. I
No.
mean, if 10% of people driving tax policy for everybody.
well, that's in
because we put
every
on April
election,
ballot.
though. I mean, that's a whole other
But-
discussion, right?
Right, and
Yeah.
anyway, I think we're saying the same thing. I just want to make sure I'm understanding your point. I don't think the concern is whether or not necessarily they're following the auditor's report. I think they are. I think the problem is, at the end of the day, some people are getting dramatic increases over their tax bill with 30 days notice to pay it and no way to make up a $1,000 gain on a property tax bill that's due in 30 days. And it doesn't matter whether that's legal, it's just wrong.
No, I get it, and I was the guy that answered those questions. I did the informal hearings on 44,000 parcels in my county for 8 years. So I heard, all those valuation discussions, but the bottom, it's a formula, it's a mathematical formula, and it starts with that base evaluation. And if the base evaluation is incorrect, or it's unequal, or it's gone up in an unequal fashion, the rest of that formula, including the rollbacks, will not kick in. And assessors have a huge job, and we were one of them. We did a pretty good job, and even the rate that we submitted to the State Tax Commission was not complete because it was based upon a set of sales that we could get because we weren't required to get certificates of value. So we were required to do a sales ratio based upon sales, but there's no method for us to gather sales data, right? There are a ton of things, to flesh out here. I just wanted, my whole thing is to make sure that we're not focused in on one area based upon either a true or an understood issue with one particular district. Go talk to that district, find out why they did what they did. And I'm not here to apologize for any taxing district, right? All I'm saying is that these processes are defined, they're in statute, but all of the different parts have to work.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to stop you there. We'll move on to some other questions. Representative Steinhoff, you are recognized to inquire.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today. I feel like we've really started this hearing off with a bang. These first two presentations have been really informative and appreciate that. You clearly have a lot of knowledge as far as appraising and assessing property. We have, you made the comment tonight that it needs to be done properly the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
And throughout all of these hearings, we do hear, as Representative Keithley has said, people coming in here, and it's not even just a 30% increase. Some people are talking about 100% increases. Yeah. And you mentioned things about, in some of our bigger communities, that it might be more of a mass increase.
It should be.
So I guess I'm getting at the fact that in your industry, is there a way that we are telling all of our Missouri assessors to do this? Is there a standard procedure? Because whether it's doing the physical inspection, whether it's the comps that are picked, we've heard so many Missourians come forward and say that they don't feel like their property has truly been assessed. I don't know if I've asked a question then. Is there a standard procedure that is very clear, or are we using a standard procedure that's very clear across our state, or something we could adopt?
So I can't answer for every county. I only have experience in the counties that I worked in. There is a standard. The IAAO standards for mass appraisal are the standards that are intended to be used. Some of the statute that's set forth is based upon those IAAO standards. You have to have the people to do that. You have to have the knowledge to do that, and you have to have the funding, quite frankly, to do it. When it comes down to an appeal, so you appraise en masse, that's a whole other topic, but the standard is used to appraise en masse, but deal with outliers individually. So you individually appraise or hear opinions of value on outliers when they're brought to you. There's no way I can know 44,000 parcels in Cape Girardeau County, for instance, right? But if a homeowner gets the notice, and I mean, I've got a $225,000 appraised value on that notice, and they're like, man, my roof caved in, we haven't lived there for 6 months, I better call the assessor, and I get that phone call, I'm going to go out and deal with that individual property, right? But I guarantee you, like our assessed value, and I don't even know what, I haven't been there in several years, but I don't even know what their ratio was that was submitted, but it's probably in the 80s, right? And some counties' value are much lower, but the true value is probably half that when you take into consideration all the property that's unappraised, not even on the roll. And again, this is not an indictment of assessors. It's an indictment of you can't put 10 gallons of water in a 5-gallon jug. They just simply don't have the resources or the funding. I don't know if it's come up about the per parcel reimbursement that assessors get, right? That's set by the General Assembly. And like the minimum is $3, and like what's the maximum is like 11. What do you think they get funded every year? $3 and change, right? So you want them to do a good job, but you don't want to fund them to do a good job. Assessors are, it's kind of, and I didn't come here to really defend assessors either, but that's a job that the better the job you do, the more you're hated. The idea is that you have to start with a base that's completely accurate. And then your mass appraisal, your markets, analysis every couple of years will keep up with that trend.
Right.
We have to get to a place where all
Right.
of the value is correct.
And one of the suggestions you made was to do another statewide reassessment.
We
which-
must. We need to do that. It's going to come to that.
What does that entail? Because I was not in this world of assessments.
Well,
when
I
that was the
wasn't there in
last time.
1981 or 2. Darren, were you?
I started in 38.
Is it, but is it a team going across the state, or is it just giving the resources locally to do it?
Yeah, he can. No, I mean he was here much before I was.
Right.
But it's additional resources for each county to go out and hire additional people.
Okay.
You want to?
I don't think he can come up
Yeah,
right
let's,
now.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
so-
we may call him back
Yeah.
if we get through this in a
Okay,
reasonable.
but in my
so
experience,
if-
I know that, for instance, the assessor in Cape Girardeau County, Bob Adams, was an appraiser, a paid appraiser back during reassessment and worked
Okay.
for Bollinger County to go out and help them do appraisals. So he was paid to do that.
So if by some miracle we were able to do that, actually have the funding to do that, and
Yeah.
give resources to all of our county assessors to just do a statewide reassessment, do you believe that our assessors would be doing that assessment in the same way? Would they be all approaching it the same way, so we felt accurate with that?
Again, I can't comment and commit for all of the other assessors, but the standard should be there, and that's the role of the tax commission and the TAs that work for the tax commission to make sure that that stuff is genuinely happening, and that's not. So that's
All right,
Yeah.
thank you very much. That's been helpful. Thank you, Mr.
three-decade
Chair.
issue here.
Representative, for what it's worth, on my notes that I always take, one of the questions I have of the commission is about a statewide reassessment, or what that might look like. So, Representative Judge Dolan, you are recognized to inquire, wherever you are.
On this, and Mr. Chairman, just to inquire.
Yes, please.
Tony, thanks for coming.
Sure.
If you sat for 2.5 hours with my friend John Voss, who's from Cape just north of me, and y'all talk numbers, I would hate to be the guy that waited on your table, because I would swear y'all talking a different language.
They left us alone, I'll tell you
But I'm
that.
glad that you are doing this, and we appreciate your testimony today. It's been
Thank you.
really helpful, and I echo that sentiments of my colleagues down on the end. My question, Representative Taylor, or Chairman Taylor, was going to be the same thing. Do we know how much it cost in 1982 to do the reassessment, and what it's going to cost in 2026 in real dollars and cents? I was in the courthouse when they did reassessment the first time, and I saw more people there with little pickup trucks with little signs stuck on the side of them that said Scott County Assessor. And there were people that I'd never seen before in my life, and they took up all the parking places around the courthouse. So it is going to involve a great number of people doing an assessment to do that, and I think maybe the tax commission may be the ones that can answer our question on how much they believe a reassessment in 2026 or 2027 statewide will cost. Again, thank you for what you've done.
Very welcome.
And we appreciate your knowledge that you've given us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I'm going to assume here, Representative Reedy, are you the only one in the room who was around at that time? Yeah. Yeah? No, I mean, in the business, though, you were as well? Okay, so we have some, I say that as a joke, kind of, but we do have some insight here on our committee. So, let's see. Representative Fowler, you are recognized to inquire.
Yes, is on?
Not yet.
Yes, thank you for your testimony, and thank you for your experience in making it to here to testify. Going with that theme that a statewide reassessment, and you maybe also mentioned a freeze with that, I hear you. And that could be a solution to this. But then you were also saying if we, a lot of the things that maybe we've talked about here over the last month or so, you were, at the last part of your testimony, you were about to talk about that, about why those solutions wouldn't work. You didn't think they would have much effect. So could you elaborate on that just a little bit more?
Well, are we talking about the existing 190, 756, 3, the issues that we've kind of worked at in the last year or two? Is that
Well,
what you-
the freeze, various counties can freeze or 5% limit.
I mean,
There's
that's
all kinds of different options out there that's been discussed, but you're saying, hey, maybe all those in combination wouldn't work and a reassessment
Well-
statewide is necessary. So I'm just,
No, they will not work. I mean, it's not going to do anything for the inequity for the folks that have similarly valued properties that may be several years apart, and one's paying half the tax of the other. You've not done anything to fix that. And so if you, for instance, if the assessor could go up and reassess this property here, right, that's half valued on the books of what it should be, right? In 1 year, he could go up and jack that up, 30%. That property owner is still only going to pay 5% taxes every other year. This guy over here that's paying full boat, twice the amount that this guy's paying, or lady, young woman, is going to pay 5% more on their taxes as well. So that inequity is just going to continue to grow, and you're not doing anything to capture that value. Now, I'm not talking about taxes. I'm talking about the value that your taxes are calculated on that will, I guarantee you, lower, and Vice Chairman Reedy can attest to the differences in tax rates after reassessment, in the original reassessment. In a lot of cases, they probably were cut in half, right, for existing taxpayers. And the ones that are at full value already, if their levy rolls back in half, they're paying half the taxes they were last year, right? And the person whose house was appraised at half value, even if he's doubled and the levy's rolled back in half, he's paying about the same as he was last year, right? So that's where your equitable values come into play, and you've really not harmed anyone. Now, you've harmed the guy that maybe has built a 10,000 square foot shop on the back of his farm that nobody can see, right? And they can't get back there to value. Well, if we trample around on his property, we're going to find that barn, that shop. We're going to get that on the roll, and he's going to start paying taxes on that at 12%, right? I mean, again, that's a whole other discussion, and I didn't even dare to bring up the whole ag valuation deal tonight. That's another topic. But am I correct? I mean, the net difference was a significant rollback of tax levies. Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Chappell, you're recognized to inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sir, I want to make sure that I heard you correctly. Did you say that the concept that there are taxing authorities in the state that are not fully rolling back, did you say that was misinformation or a myth? Did I hear you correctly?
That would be very careless of me to say that that did not happen. What I know I intended was that it's not as widespread as what I've encountered in lots of these meetings and in conversations with assessors, with school folks, with library board folks. That's the world that I lived in for a long time. And you hear things that are used as examples, and maybe they heard about this happen in this one county, but nobody knew what the school district was, or nobody knew what the fire district was. And so are there issues where there was a mistake? Yes. And can I tell you, if there was a debt service that levy that was not at its cap, that they did not increase that debt service levy? No, because it's law, and they probably did. And you've got voters in the school district that elected their school board members to make those changes, right, on behalf of their districts. And so that's another thing. I'm going to editorialize a little bit. We're a state that's pretty conservative and likes to talk about how we like local control. Well, a lot of what we've done here is we've overruled that local control, where we've had people elect their own boards. Now, I'm not talking just schools, fire districts, library districts, sewer districts, all that. They've got boards that were elected by their people to annually look at the funding needs for those districts and set those levies up to the cap that the voters voted on.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm pretty good at math myself.
Sure.
And for example, a few years ago, the state government, the General Assembly, passed the gas tax over a 5-year period so that it would come in just under the Hancock Amendment and therefore not require a vote of the citizens of the state of Missouri.
Sure.
After they've been told no 3 different times by the citizens when they went to a statewide vote. And so the idea to me that there are no entities that are utilizing the system in a way that's not ethical, I think that would be extraordinary to suggest that out of 114 counties plus the city of St. Louis, nobody's doing poorly for the citizens. Everybody, there's really good examples and really poor examples in every walk of life. If assessors are the one group of people that just don't do that, I'm really impressed.
This was not an indictment about assessors performing poorly, and I hope my colleagues here didn't see that. It was about them not having the resources.
Well, that's the second question. That's the next question I want to ask you.
That is, in fact, again, it's math. That is, in fact, how this whole process.
I just want to make sure I'm pretty sure I heard you correctly, but maybe I didn't. But then you went on to say that because of the limitation of assessors to be able to actually do all the properties, and that's a reality, that there would be a limited number of properties that are actually reassessed in a given time frame.
That's absolute fact.
And if they are reassessed at a rate of, say, 8% increase, but because the entirety of the districts do not attain enough revenue increase to trigger the rollback, those limited individuals, they're going to see an 8% increase in their taxes.
Right.
So my point is, the point of my question is, have we established a system that touts Hancock, and then because of the nature of the system, it does not always permit Hancock to actually do what we say it's going to do?
Well, it's a mathematical fact. It has to reach it's an aggregate, okay, and it's not.
No,
all
I
the
understand.
districts.
I understand.
It's not all the districts. So again, I'm going to go back to Cape County because it's what I know intimately because I dealt with it. Of all the school districts, Jackson, Cape Girardeau, Delta, Oak Ridge, we might increase, or we might go over the CPI or 5% in the aggregate of one of those school districts, and they may be required to roll back. Oak Ridge may not. It's substantially agricultural. They have very little residential and no commercial to speak of, right? It's harder for them to get there. And if we go out and appraise the houses in Oak Ridge School District and we increase those houses by 8%, those homeowners are absolutely going to get an 8% tax increase.
Right. So the idea that being reassessed in the manner in which it's done now, you're much more likely to see your individual property tax go up more than the 5% cap, even given CPI being averaging over the last 45 years 3.03%.
If the entirety of the districts are not completely reassessed and kept assessed. So that's the thing. If you do this one time, right, like they did in 1981 or 2 or whatever year it was, and you actually do it every other year or 4 years, whatever you decide upon, right, you keep them at substantially market value, you're not going to have a problem. You're not going to have years where you'll have a 20% increase on a property because they've all been properly reassessed as per law every 2 years.
But you're telling me that's not really possible.
Not right now with the resources that assessors have.
So let me ask you this one last question, and then I'll hush, Mr. Chair. What would be wrong with establishing a true value in money on a property and then simply saying that the assessment takes into account inflation for that property every year from here on out, and it's 5th grade math?
No, I don't understand.
I bought a house for $40,000 in 1980.
Yeah.
And over the last 45 years, the increase of inflation, cumulative, since 1980 is 292%. What if every year my value had been increased by the rate of inflation every year over that length of period, and now my property is valued 292% more than what it was the day I purchased it 45 years ago?
That's a statistical fact. If you look at the national average on home sales, they double in value every 20 years.
Well, that's because that's when they get purchased. So what I'm asking is, Unless and until it gets purchased, we're just guessing at what the value is based on what everything else is going on around them.
That's where sales comparison, that's a whole appraisal theory, too, that we probably don't have time to talk about.
No, I understand.
A house value is not dependent upon its selling. It's valued at what it is as comparable to a like-kind product in the market.
That's just sold.
That's substitute, that's a law of substitution. But, again, I'm not, being combative with you, I'm just
Oh,
saying.
I'm not being combative with you. I'm asking a legitimate question.
Yeah.
If we're talking about the inability to go around and reassess all properties, why would we not just say, okay, here's what we're going to do. All properties are going to increase by the rate of inflation this year because that's the cap anyway. Why would we not just do that? And you know exactly what your taxes are going to be. It's last year times 1.0303.
That would create a lot of solutions, but you have to start with the current value.
Or a value.
Or a value, because in that 40 years, again, let's go back to my house, built in 1965. My neighbor's house, built about the same time. My house is a little bit better kept, right? Maybe than my neighbor. I'm not saying this is a fact, but just say it is, right?
Yeah.
If you do that math, that value will be true for my house and not theirs.
And that's when they would go to the BOE. And the defense would be, hey, we don't take care of our stuff, right?
Sure.
But my point, yes, sir, I know. My point is, a simple mathematical equation could work.
It could.
Okay,
sure.
thank you.
And you'd still have to deal with the outliers. So, but yes,
But you got to deal with those anyway.
that's true.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I thought I would share real quick before we have at least, we have one more question after this, but so I've said it many times, I'll keep saying it until I'm out of office, but if I'm the hub of a wheel, I have two spokes in that wheel. One of them is the lady sitting right over there at this table. The other one's at home watching right now as we speak. So the spoke here sent some information that might be pertinent. 1985 was when the last statewide reassessment took place. The total cost was $121,826,966 in 1985 dollars. That equates to $49.86 per parcel. The 1985 reassessment resulted from the Hancock Amendment, which was passed by Missouri voters in 1980 and took effect in 81. The amendment limited increases in statewide revenue, on and on and on. So anyway, 1985, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Representative Van Scoik, you are recognized to inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing that I spoke to Northwest Missouri assessors on Friday, was very happy to do so, and we had a good discussion. One thing that came up in that discussion I haven't heard anywhere in these committee hearings is about how important it is for our assessment of our counties to be accurate in case of a disaster.
Absolutely.
Would you go into that just a little bit, please?
I'll do the best I can, and only in a role because one of my prior responsibilities was overseeing a new GIS system. Just for this role, because we've had a couple tornadoes. We could go back and, we had to reassess Delta. And I wasn't there, but we had it in place so that the EMS it could go in and help do assessment along with SEMA, and I'm not sure FEMA. Anyway, I think it's very important to know what's there because a lot of that's tied to state and federal aid after the fact in a disaster. And it's easy when you've got data at the assessor's office that you can give to them on a hard drive to go out and provide that information, both in property record information and photography, aerial photography, which I think the state's made, an ample effort to provide for all counties in some fashion. Some are a lot better off than others, and some have, a lot more detailed photography, but that's certainly a big benefit.
Yeah. So if a county is underassessed drastically, and disaster comes through, they're likely to not get the federal aid that they would have got had their assessment been where it should be. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not an expert on federal aid, but it's much easier to get at the data that the feds are looking for, or the state's
It's easier to find it at the assessment
It's easier to find it, and I think it's more onus on the property owner to try to provide, if your house is no longer there, you got to go to a lot of effort to provide some kind of, justification for what kind of values there, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Now, listen, this didn't come from any smoke in my wheel, maybe the grease in the wheel behind me here. That 121 million equates to 366 million in today's dollars. So at a time, keep this in mind, committee and folks, at a time when our budget is drawing smaller and smaller and more restrictive, that's a pretty good hurdle to have to overcome when we start thinking about statewide reassessment. So anyway.
I mean, it's big dollars, right? When you get at the level that you guys are, you're used to dealing with lots of zeros because there's a lot of people and a lot of things at stake. And so I would, suggest that you look at how much we're spending on all kinds of other things to see what that 300 million might offset.
Gentlemen, I appreciate your testimony. It's been very informative.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Oh. Did you have a question or statement? Did I get by? Did I let him down?
I can do it later.
Okay, all right. Darlene, I think you were on deck. Come on up. And then Dennis Miller, you're on deck now. Hi, lady.
Hi. I'm a little nervous, so.
It's okay. Just introduce yourself. Tell us who you're.
All right, my name is Darlene Ship. I am the Collector Treasurer of Sheraton County. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. And thank you also to all of you on this committee that is taking the time to learn and gather information to try to solve a problem. I believe that when all of the meetings are finished, a solution will be found. Just a little background on a couple comments. I'm in my 28th year in the collector's office. I've served on a school board, the Senate Bill 40 board, and my husband and son are on the local volunteer fire department. So I'm very invested in our community. And I apologize because Darren went before me and said a few of the same comments that I had prepared, so I'm sorry if I repeat. My assessor has been in the office 24 years. My clerk has been in the office 30 years. There are other counties like us out there, and I've been involved with the Collectors Association and on the legislative committee for about the last 5 years or so. In my experience, when we have given our suggestions and try to help with language on bills, our voice is being ignored sometimes. And then we end up with situations like Senate Bill 190. In my world, the collector's office has had a nightmare with that. I give you these numbers and information to say that there are seasoned local officials out there that understand the ins and outs of local government operations. In recent years, things get passed without a plan of how to do it or how it will affect those that actually have to do the job. My ask is this. When a solution is proposed from all of these meetings, that you would reach out to some of those seasoned local officials to make sure that the proposal offered has a way of implementation that is precise and good for all involved. At the end of the day, the local officials are the ones that have to put the laws into action. So please consult those who can help figure out how and help you help figure out how to make that work. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions for this witness? Yes, Representative Harbison, you were recognized to inquire.
Thank you for coming today. We appreciate your time and coming up here. On the 190, what does that program cost your county to implement?
So for my county, I am very fortunate that we are not doing it yet. We wanted to wait till some of the lawsuits got worked out before. So for me personally, we are not doing it yet.
Okay, I've heard numbers, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I know locally for me, I have 7 counties in southeast Missouri, $25,000, $30,000.
Yes.
A lot of my budgets there are like $2 million, $2.4 million for the whole county. So $25,000, $30,000, that's a lot of money.
It's a lot, yes.
For the program. But anyway, thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
And testifying.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Seeing no further questions, listen, I have a question to ask.
Okay.
Are there any collectors in the state who have longer tenure than you?
There's a couple.
There's still a couple.
But I was one of the younger ones, and now I'm not. And so yes, I'm getting up there with the age of some of the collectors that have been there a while, so.
Appreciate you coming. Thank you, ma'am. All right, listen, in the good discussion, and this happens every time, I failed to remember that I said we were going to break at 45 minutes. So we're past that. So we're going to be at ease now for 10 minutes.
Attention, everyone. We're going to be starting again in a couple minutes, so if you can find your seats. And also, if you still want to testify, you can sign in and fill out a witness form. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get back to order of business here. I want to take just a quick second to recognize some state representatives who are here, and I want to thank them for coming down. I'm going to read their names off, and if these folks are your state representatives, you need to be in touch with them if you aren't already. So Peggy McGall, are you still here? They're all outside? Okay. Kent Hayden, Doc, thank you for coming. Ed Lewis, which this is his district. Ed's still here. Lewis Riggs, John Martin, and Danny Busey. Yep, still here. All right. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. You sitting in. Here they come. Now, as the rules go in the state capitol, these folks aren't allowed to get up and testify. It's constituent business. So, all right. Okay. We just recognizing you folks. Nope, you didn't do anything. All right, Dennis Miller, I think, is that you, sir? And then on deck is going to be Evan Emmerich. So, Mr. Miller, you are welcome to introduce yourself and then proceed.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak this evening. Thank you so much for having this hearing. It's great to see all the state covered, especially northern Missouri. My name is Dennis Miller. I am a member of the SB 40 board in Kirksville, Missouri. I'm also I teach American government at Northeast Christian High School in Kirksville, Missouri, but most importantly for this evening, I'm a person with a disability. Obviously, I am blind. I was born blind. I also wear cochlear implants. I will not take up much of your time, but I would like to just remind you, and I'm sure you guys know this, but sometimes it can get lost as you hear so many different testimonies from so many different concerned citizens and groups. Especially in rural Missouri, any decrease in property tax or elimination in property tax, for that matter, is going to significantly hurt people with disabilities, whether they receive SB 40 services or any services really that are covered by property tax. That could be, schools will be affected, which could affect special ed programs. Please keep in mind that the unemployment rate for people with disabilities is somewhere between 72 and 75%, depending on what source you are looking at. And most of those people, many of those people are qualified to work and desperately want to work if somebody would simply hire them. But since nobody is doing that, they rely on those services to be able to live independently. There once was a time when if you had a disability, you automatically went to a nursing home or you were hidden away somewhere. That's obviously not the case anymore. And we have the right to live the same quality of life as everybody else. So I would just encourage everyone on this committee to remember that if any cuts or elimination of sales tax takes place, please find some alternative funding source so that the programs that many of us rely on a daily basis, sometimes life-saving programs, are not hurt and not cut, because those of us in rural Missouri are especially going to feel that. And I just thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening and pray that you will keep people with disabilities in mind as you tackle these very important topics. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Miller, for taking the time to come testify. Any questions for this witness? Who is it? Okay. Representative, you are recognized to inquire. The mic
should be able to.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for the mic. Thank you for being here. I think that it is the goal of our committee to make sure that those who are especially vulnerable, that their services remain intact. If it's not funded through property taxes or any other sort of tax, that something will be done to make sure that you receive those services. I know that's the goal, one of the goals of all of us here. So please be rest assured that that is something that we will make sure that we protect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Representative.
Representative Harbison, you are recognized to inquire.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there was a sheltered workshop up in, I'm from southeast Missouri. We have one there in Iron County.
SB 40 is required to allocate some funds for sheltered workshops, which they all continue to do. We certainly, I as a person, I will just speak as a person and not as a member of the our local SB 40 board. I am a very, very strong believer in integrated employment. And in order to do that, we need the resources to be able to do that. Workshops have their place, but I think in many cases, individuals who are very able to work in integrated employment situations are encouraged to go into workshop situations. But to answer your question, yes, part of the money that SB 40 receives does go toward shelter workshops.
Well, thank you for being here today, and thank you for your input.
Any other questions for the witness? Seeing none, gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time to come.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. All right, up next, Evan, you're up next, and then on deck will be, is it Rhonda? Rhonda Ann? Anna, okay. You're on deck. Please proceed, sir.
My name is Evan Emmerich. I'm Sheridan County Presiding Commissioner. Appreciate you all coming up here and hearing from us up here in the rural area out in Missouri here. So I'll keep it pretty short because you've already heard from my assessor and my collector treasurer. But what we want you to know our big point right here is if decisions are going to be made, we want you to talk with your local county officials, other board members. So when something happens, we are aware and can give you some input on that. So what happens when we open up a can of worms with starting, with property taxes here? Well, what we feel happens at the county level, something gets brought up at the state level, opens up the can of worms, something might be good. By the time it gets down to the legislation, we're not so happy. For example, SB 190. We understand you want to help people, but every time you lessen that tax base, then someone else has to pick that up. So I know when talk about our property taxes, there's been a talk of, well, we need to get rid of personal property taxes for those items. But the whole point of that in somewhere like Sheridan County, where we don't have much sales tax, we don't have a Walmart. So when you lessen the personal property taxes, you take that whole segment of the population who doesn't own a house or any property, when you take them out, then that lessens our tax base, and then that's put onto all our landowners or homeowners. So then when you do that with something like SB 190, where you take the folks that are retired, and we understand that some of them are having problems paying those taxes, but every time you reduce that base, someone else has to. So, we support our senior citizens, but then, some of our senior citizens, they live in $500,000 homes and they have 1,000 acres of land. And then you got someone that's 20 years old that's maybe trying to start a business or go to school, and they're having to pay their full tax rate. And someone that, has a bunch of money invested or available, they don't have to pay that. So means-based might work a little bit better in a system like that, which already exists on the state level. So since that already existed on the state level, why do we go into the counties and then mess up our system? So we just ask that, if you're going to do something, you got to work with a wide tax base. You can't keep cutting it down, because we had SB 190, which we know was a problem because then you all had to go and fix it a little bit. And then all of a sudden this year we have SB 3 where we expanded a little bit throughout so when we know we had a problem, why are we expanding it to make a further problem for the counties? So in Sheridan County, like I said, when you talk about, getting rid of or lowering your tax base or maybe moving to a consumption tax, like a sales tax, that sort of stuff, like I said, we just don't have that. Our revenues are from property taxes. So it's hard to make. I understand you all have a tough job to do because you got St. Louis, Kansas City, you got Sheridan County. It's hard, there's not a one size fits all, but we just want to keep you informed and hear from us when you all are thinking of changing these avenues. So I will just say that, so Sheridan County here within the last 10 years, there's been so when we talk about maybe moving to a sales tax way of doing it a little bit more. So there was a big, you all have heard of it, Grainbelt Express is a big power line company going to come through. So we kind of fought with them, whatever, we've not made up, but it's going to happen probably at some point. Well, part of that, they've been telling us for 10 years, is part of them coming through, we're going to be getting probably $1 million in use tax. Well, a couple of years ago, the state legislature apparently cut down some of the use tax or sales tax that these energy companies have to pay. So then when the company that we've been fighting with, we've been arguing with, so now all of a sudden, instead of us maybe counting on that $1 million that's going to come through, we get nothing out of it. So we just want you to keep in mind all the local entities when you start changing these things around. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any questions for this? Yes. Let's start on the far end. We'll work our way back this way. Representative Keithley, you are recognized to inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one point for your consideration, then I do have a question for you, or I guess maybe a clarification, but it was certainly a question. Anyway, for your consideration, you complained about the senior citizen in a $500,000 home. I just, again, pointing out a lot of times when you have a senior citizen in a $500,000 home, they didn't buy a $500,000 home. They bought a $40,000 home or a $100,000 home, and then they got assessed into a $500,000 home without ever seeing the profit. whereas a 20-year-old who's in a $200,000 home probably bought a $200,000 home. So anyway, for your consideration. The question I have, though, is this is now, I think, the third time I've heard reference to keeping a wide tax base. And I agree with growing the tax base completely in principle. Not so much the taxes, but taxes. But then that's been followed up every time. And you're not the first one to do it. Followed up with the statement that when we give the senior tax freeze, when we do SB 190, when we enact that, someone else has to pick up the slack. Well, the implication in that is that the counties are operating from the standpoint that, well, if I can't get the money from the seniors, I'm going to go find someone else who doesn't qualify for the freeze to go get it. And I'm looking at the process. You're still assessing senior homes. They're still going into the total levy. You have to return it as a credit, but there really isn't a place in SB 190, if implemented properly and legally, where that should go on to another homeowner. So I'm wondering, is there actually, this is off of your question, the implication is that we are looking to raise taxes on non-seniors to make up the shortfall that we're experiencing. How are the counties going about doing that? Because I don't see a mechanism in SB 190 that allows it. The only thing I see is putting more tax hike increases on the ballot for people to vote for, or getting it through the assessment process, assessing people that you know are in the tax freeze at lower rates, and then trying to squeeze it out of people on the other end, which is exactly why we're here if that's happening. But I don't see another way unless the counties can be determined to get it out from someone else, because SB 190 doesn't do that. That is the counties making those decisions, or the taxing jurisdiction making those decisions.
Well, we're not looking to raise taxes on anybody. Sheridan County, I've been there for 7 years. We've lowered our tax rate by 47%. So we're not looking, I'm just saying, if you take out a tax base and take out those revenues from all these entities, then at some point with increased prices and stuff, the money's going to have to come from somewhere, and if you can't tax that segment of the population, eventually the money's going to come from somewhere, the people that are being taxed.
I think that's my question is you say eventually it's coming. How? Is it a plan to increase property tax rates, or is it through the assessment process that we're going to assess younger people at higher rates to make up the shortfall?
We, Sheridan County, have not implemented SB 190.
Okay.
So I don't know exactly, we don't have the figures on that.
Well, I've heard several people come up and say very certainly that someone's going to make up the shortfall, and I'd like to know the plan for that. Who are we raising taxes on to make up the shortfall? Because SB 190 doesn't do that. Thank you.
Let's see, I have Representative Harbison, you're next on the list, so you're recognized to inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to ask you something that I asked the assessor earlier, but you know, you have an association as well. I've only been in the legislature 8 months, but I made a statement last year when I was running for office, and I still truly believe in it, that we need to elect people from the assessor's office to the governor's mansion that are willing to work together. In your situation, does the people that represent you, the people that represent the assessors, the collectors, do they collaborate? I mean, a lot of times with 93 counties, the third-class counties, money is always the issue, and not having enough most of the time. But I mean, is there some kind of collaboration between your associations that work together for the greater good of the county?
Well, I mean, you have, like, we have a commissioner association, they have assessors, collector treasurers, all that.
Yep.
And then we have the full Missouri Association of Counties, which covers everything. Now, I honestly don't always think they do the best job representing us, but yeah. So there is an entity that does cover all that.
Well, like I said, I've been here 8 months. I'm learning, but I mean, I do believe that we need to work together for the 6 million plus people that we serve across the state. But thank you for coming today, and thank you for your testimony.
Representative Boyko, you're recognized to inquire.
Sure, thanks. There was a line of questioning earlier tonight to an assessor, essentially saying what punishment is there for an assessor who overvalues property. Obviously, what was going through my head is what incentive is there for an assessor to overvalue property? And so understanding your role, have you ever had a conversation with an assessor in which there's been a discussion about we should overvalue certain properties?
No. Well, My assessor was the first one that got up here and talked, and he's very knowledgeable, so he's been there a lot longer than I have. No, there's no talk about, oh, yes, we're going to go after and over-assess these. I'm just saying down the road, if you decrease your tax base, then eventually, at some point, the money's going to have to come from somewhere.
Okay, it's not like you and the assessor sit down and say, we're going to override the property because you and I are going to own a yacht someday or anything like that.
No, maybe Darren does, but I don't know.
All right, thank you.
The river is nearby them, so, yeah. Representative Fowler, you're recognized to inquire.
Yes. I think you quoted a reduction in your county's levy. Could you expand on that a little bit more? Was that as a result of what?
Voluntary. We reduced our tax rate. Yeah.
Okay, so
We went from when I took office, we were at 27.5%, and we're just today, we had our tax rate hearing and down to 14.5%.
Awesome. It's great to hear that. Thanks for doing your citizens a service.
Any other questions for the witness? Seeing none, Commissioner, thanks for coming.
Tim.
Yep, you bet. Have a good day. All right. Up next, Rhonda, you're up next, and then on deck is going to be Matt Rayner.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rhonda Anno, and I am the Macon County Collector. I appreciate you, the committee, for giving us the opportunity to listen tonight, to learn tonight, and to speak. As a county collector, I see firsthand how property tax policy impacts both taxpayers and local governments. There's a sign above my door if you walk in, and it says, "Are you extending grace?" A lot of times when people come in my office, they're not upset with me. They're upset with their pocketbook, their wallet. I'm just on the other side of that counter, so I hear things. I've seen things. It gets interesting during tax time, and sometimes it gets really, really sad. I think some of the sadness and some of the disparity comes from they feel like they're not being treated equally. Assessment values, times are hard for a lot of people. I think the majority of the challenges largely stem from loopholes in the Hancock Amendment. The gaps that are unintentionally shifted, it pressures us collectors into a role where we have to enforce legislative intent rather than just executing written law. I was hired to do one thing, and that's collect. I'm not good at interpreting statute. It's not something that I even want to try. It's outside of my scope, outside of my wheelhouse. Before I was a collector, I worked in the assessor's office almost 8 years. I think what I'm good at fundamentally is serving my tax people. That's why I do the job. While Senate Bill 3 and Senate Bill 190 attempt to address pieces of the problem, I feel like oftentimes it's more or less a Band-Aid. It creates a patchwork system that benefits some taxpayers while leaving others behind. Several years ago, and I don't even know how long ago, but there was the law passed for veterans. And I have veterans come in and ask me where their tax savings, where they can, best put their money. But not only do they have to be 100% disabled, they have to be a prisoner of war at some time. We don't have any of those in our county. And if they do, they're probably in a nursing home. They don't own real estate. They don't own a vehicle. And that doesn't help anybody. So we just need good legislature that says what it means and means what it says. True reform, I feel like, must come from the legislature exercising its authority to review, adjust, and clarify. We just need a fair and consistent and transparent property tax system. I don't know how to fix it, but I'm trying and I'm willing to learn. We don't set tax policy, and by we, I mean the collectors. We just execute. The responsibility for adjusting rates and credits and formulas, I don't think belongs in the county office. I think that's legislature. Again, it's above my pay grade. How do I pay my school districts with credits? Or my nursing homes, or my fire districts? It doesn't make sense in my head. And maybe it's because I don't have an accounting degree. But I'm trying to make it make sense. And I've got one girl in my office. Our county has 15,000 people in it. We've got 900 miles of roads, so we're big. We're 12th largest in the state of Missouri, but we're 15,000 rural people. And the one girl I have in my office, her last day is Friday. And overloading collectors with small amounts of people in our offices, and I don't know how many people everybody else have. I just, can rely on my experience. But giving us quasi-legislative duties creates an administrative strain and taxpayer frustration. Senate Bill 3 and Senate Bill 190 target small select parts of the system rather than fixing some of the structural issues. They create winners and losers among taxpayers by cherry picking who benefits. Do I think seniors need a credit? Absolutely. But inconsistent policy makes it harder for counties to administer fairly and for taxpayers to understand their bills. And our bills are pretty cut and dry now, and sometimes, why do the schools get so much money? Why does this? Why does that? We just need to make it simpler. And I don't know, again, I don't know what that answer is, but I'm here for it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So, before I call on you, Representative Steinhoff, I'd like to inquire of the witness. You talked about, I was sitting at home the other day eating lunch, and I'd gotten the mail and in the newspaper in Cooper County. I got to the page where it started listing all the properties that were going to be sold at the courthouse.
Yes, sir.
Right?
That was Monday.
So,
yes.
that's very recent. So I assume that's happens at the same time across the state. Would that be
By
fair?
law, yes, the fourth
Yep.
Monday of August at
Okay.
10 o'clock.
So I looked at all those properties. There were many, and some of them are in that very smallest of small towns where I live closest to, of Bunston, and I wondered about who those people were, what their situation was. Many are abandoned properties because I know those properties. Tell me about your county. How many did you have? And can you tell me, more importantly, were they senior citizens who are losing those properties? Or are they people who live out of state? Just talk about that
Sure.
dynamic.
When I first started my first list, which I do that back around June, I have a 2-year tax sale. So 2 years unpaid taxes qualifies you for the back tax sale. When I started, that list was 201. The actual day of the sale on Monday, I had 13 properties. 3 of them were no sales, and 1 of them was voided because of a clerical error. One of the people on that tax sale every year is a senior citizen. His wife died last year. He struggles. He's got a couple of properties. He rents them out. And Mr. Charlie's always been on the list. As long as I've been in office, he's been on the list. He's always struggled.
Do you believe it's because he procrastinates, perhaps, or do you
There is
know
some
him
of that.
personally?
It's not against the law not to pay your taxes on time.
Yep, right.
It's frowned upon, but it's not against the law. And some people would rather pay the penalties than do it on time. I'm not sure. One of the properties that sold, actually 2 of the properties that sold, was a lady who'd been passed away for some time. Nobody had taken charge of. There was no probate. There was no will, none of that stuff. Some people just walk away. There was a couple of them, Florida, Tennessee, just up and go.
Okay.
So out of the 13 that were left, that were sold at the tax sale, maybe 4 of them will redeem it. And what that is they've got a year, according to my office, a year to redeem their property, come back, make the person who purchased it at the tax sale whole.
Right.
And then we start over. Some of those happen every year. Some people just aren't really inspired.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Representative Steinhoff, you are recognized to inquire.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to testify today. I wondered if you could expand a little bit on what you called the loopholes in Hancock.
So I can. So a summary of the Hancock, for those of you who don't know, that's a Hancock Amendment. It's a taxation protection rule. Its main purpose is to stop the government from raising taxes too much without asking voters first. The amendment sets limits on how much revenue the state and local governments can collect from taxes. And the basic idea is if your property values go up, your tax bills could skyrocket. So the Hancock Amendment says local governments must roll back their tax rates when property values rise too quickly, so you're not hit with unexpected bills. And they want you to ask voters for approval through the referendum. And we need it because taxpayers need to have a say. Where things get messy is, over the years, the way Hancock has interpreted has created gaps, and that's one of the problems that I have. I'm not good at interpreting law. I'm not a lawyer. I don't have any experience in that.
But
no
as far as
expertise.
that tax rate setting, isn't that done through the forms that are on the auditor's office?
Yes, and that's also a little bit outside of my scope. I get my levies from my clerk, who...
That's kind of why I was asking.
The
I
deputy
was wondering, in your
clerk. Yeah.
office, are you really dealing with Hancock, or is that done outside of your office, and then you're just given levies?
I feel it in my office.
Okay.
So...
But then a loophole, I feel like when I hear that, that indicates somebody has found a trick to get around it. Is that what you mean? And maybe I'm misinterpreting the term.
Yes, and I don't know that I can explain it to you articulately, but it's something that's talked about in some of the association conferences that I've gone to. It's talked about in the Missouri Association of Counties, I've heard. I'm on a committee with them as well.
So you don't, I mean...
I can't specifically tell you exactly what the loophole is.
Well, I will say, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about...
Some don't roll back enough and some overcorrect.
Well, I think there is that misunderstanding. I think it was talked about earlier that Hancock doesn't apply at that individual level. So when somebody's looking at their own tax bill, it may have gone up.
For sure. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's not a taxing entity doing something illegal or finding a loop, a loophole.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Ma'am, thank you for coming to testify. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Okay, Matt, you're up. And then Sean Jacob, you're on deck.
Good evening. My name is Matt Rayner, and I am the director of the Marshall Public Library in Marshall, Missouri. I'm not going to get into the weeds of tax law and everything, but I just want to let you guys know what property taxes do in Marshall and in Saline County for us. So our library directly serves a population of over 13,000 residents, but as the largest library in Saline County, we reach far beyond our city limits, providing resources and services to citizens and students from across the county. I'm here today, or tonight, to emphasize how critical property tax is to sustaining vital local services, especially libraries. Property tax is the backbone of Missouri's local government funding. It keeps special districts, fire, ambulance, health centers, and yes, libraries operating and responsive to the needs of their communities. Libraries are not luxuries. They are anchors of community life. In Marshall and throughout our rural county, public spaces to gather are limited. Without coffee shops in every corner or multiple recreation centers, the library is often the one welcoming third place, which is not home, not school, not work, but it's a safe and free space where people on all ages can meet, learn, and connect. On any given day, you might find school children gathering for after-school programs, seniors meeting for a book club, a job seeker using our computers, or a young family enjoying story time. Because property tax revenues stay local, they ensure communities like ours can sustain these spaces that are uniquely tailored to local needs. If weakened, the very institutions that hold our small towns together, the places where citizens gather, grow, and build community, would suffer. Property tax is not just a funding mechanism. It is an investment in people and relationships in the civic life of our towns and counties. By protecting and strengthening this system, you help ensure that every Missourian, no matter how large or small their community, has access to essential services and a place to belong. Thank you for your time, for your leadership, and for your commitment to preserving the future of Missouri libraries and the communities they serve.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Mr. Jacob? Nope. Is that right? Who did I say was on deck? Yes. Yep, okay. And then, so now on deck is Joni Schnall.
Good evening. My name is Sean Jacob. I serve as the Executive Director for Adair County SB 40, a local Senate Bill 40 board that supports individuals with developmental disabilities in our community. I'm also here representing MACDDS, the Missouri Association of County Developmental Disability Services. Our statewide network supports some of Missouri's most vulnerable citizens, people with autism, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, and other developmental disabilities, through local services that are tailored to meet county-specific needs. So Adair County SB 40 provides targeted case management to approximately 465 citizens in Adair, Schuyler, Scotland, Sullivan, and Putnam counties. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I also want to acknowledge the committee's concern over rising property tax assessments. We recognize this is a difficult issue for many Missourians, and I appreciate your efforts in studying it thoroughly. Our agency exists because local taxpayers voted for and invested in a Senate Bill 40 levy. These dollars are managed by a board of county residents appointed locally and spent locally, always with fiscal transparency and accountability. We honor the Hancock Agreement, and we deeply value the trust that our neighbors have placed in us. In Adair County, the SB 40 funds help us be the first and sometimes the only safety net for families in crisis. When a child with a disability isn't on Medicaid yet, or when state-funded services are delayed, we step in. We provide funding for transportation, employment, including funding for workshops, assistive technology, respite care, and emergency assistance, often keeping people out of more expensive institutional placements. This is not just cost-effective, it's humane and community-centered. These services help individuals live safely and meaningfully in their communities. Without this funding, these options shrink dramatically. Some may suggest replacing or offsetting local property tax revenue with a state-level consumption tax. However, this approach poses serious challenges for rural communities like ours. Sales volume is inherently lower in less populated counties. Much consumer spending occurs outside of local area or online, meaning those dollars don't return to the local services. Sales taxes are also more volatile than property taxes, fluctuating with the economy and making service planning difficult. And finally, consumption taxes remove the clear link between local taxpayers and locally governed services that they support. For these reasons, a consumption tax is not a reliable or appropriate replacement for the stable, voter-approved property taxes that fund critical disability services. I'll leave you just one example. Just last month, we used local funds to help a young adult with autism from being institutionalized, simply by helping his family access the tools and support they needed related to his sensory challenges, which helped decrease the negative behaviors he was having. And that's the kind of fast, flexible response that only local control allows. 30% of our agency's revenue is the property taxes. 70% is from the TCM rate, where we bill Medicaid for case management services. We have not had a rate increase in 11 years now. And so on one side, we haven't had an increase, and then the potential threat of a decrease with property taxes is kind of an attack on both sides from our ability to continue to function. So for example, a 25% reduction would eliminate our ability to give services to people without Medicaid, and severely limit any grants we could do in the future. So we understand the concerns you are weighing. We ask that you consider the cost of losing these vital safety nets. Capping or limiting this funding could move us from a model of proactive support, being a resource for our community, to one of responsive crisis and long-term dependency. So thank you for your time and for your service to our state and to citizens of all abilities. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, gentlemen. Is that Representative Chappell on the end down there? If so, I recognize you to inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's hard to get someone's attention when you can't see that individual, and I appreciate you looking down my way.
Somehow I assumed you may have a question.
Well, first of all, thank you for being here this evening. I've been a big supporter of the Senate Bill 40 boards and the work that they do locally for many, many years, been involved, fought for the one in Polk County, actually. But you said something that caught my attention. And if I misheard you, please don't hesitate to let me know. But I believe you said that changing from a property tax basis to a consumption tax basis would disconnect the community from the services that are being offered in some way. Is that a fair representation of your comment? It was toward the end there.
I said it's not a reliable and appropriate replacement for the stable voter-approved property taxes.
No, that's not the part I was talking about. You said something about that substituting a consumption tax would not allow for the close connection between the citizens and the local government in some way. I'm almost positive that's what you said.
Okay, yeah, the statement before. So, finally, consumption taxes remove the clear link between local taxpayers and local government. So it being as clear of a link possibly.
I wonder how cities get around that. Because that's almost universally how they get their revenue.
Right.
Are the citizens of the cities disconnected from City Hall, you suspect?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, that hasn't been my experience as a city manager for my career, but I was just curious as to what your thought process was on that. All right, thank you, sir.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Keithley, before I turn it over to you, I'd like to make a comment too, and it comes from something you said right along the same line there. In this discussion about moving to a consumption tax and the difficulties that I see that it is to represent the rural districts from a consumption tax, we can't, in our rural districts, we can't stand alone on that. It would have to be something completely drawn up, something new that redistributes funds from a state level to those counties. And it's highly into the taxing entities, right? Highly difficult, and I think we may be creating something larger than that. But to the point, you said a consumption tax is unfair because it's unstable, and if the economy is doing bad, then people aren't buying stuff, and so that would affect your business, right? Who is to say that if things are really, really bad and people aren't making as much money and they're not spending as much money, that we should still tax them at the same rate? Why should the citizens suffer, yet the taxing entities don't suffer, and that on the backs of the citizens who are having difficulty? That's just, again, no reply necessary. It just struck me that came up in your discussion. So
We understand it's a complicated issue.
Sure.
Absolutely.
No, I appreciate it. Representative Keithley, you are recognized to inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for sharing the experience of your particular jurisdiction. I'm wondering, do you know roughly how many individuals that you supply help with, or how many people you service? Not like the total in the jurisdiction, but how many people are actually benefited by that? I'm just looking at kind of an estimate on the numbers on.
Yeah, how many people are in our services?
Yes.
465 approximately.
465?
Yeah.
And what is the total revenue of that, of your SB 40 board through the property taxes?
How much do we receive from property taxes?
Yeah.
Just over 600,000 a year.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Representative Boyko, you're recognized to inquire.
So I guess, first of all, on the issue of the volatility of sales taxes, obviously it works in both directions. So if the economy is great, everyone pays more in taxes, I guess, if we had gone to a sales tax model as opposed to real estate or property tax, right?
Right.
Okay. It's just more difficult for you and schools and everyone else to plan for that volatility, right?
Yes, it's hard to plan ahead with a budget. We approve it for the entire year and try to stay within that. So if it fluctuates, yeah.
Okay. And then on the issue of local connection, Representative Chaplin asked about, I interpreted what you were saying as, for example, if a library is gets its revenue from property tax in a particular jurisdiction, it's pretty easy for them to say only the people who live in that jurisdiction can check out a book, right? And those are the people that we service. If you go to a sales tax model, it's much more difficult to the library to say only people who bought a Snickers bar at the convenience store can purchase or can check out a library book, right? Is that sort of the point that you were getting at?
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions? Gentlemen, thanks for what you do. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming to testify. All right, I want to say on deck, Anita James, I think I have that right. You're on deck. Please, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Joni Chenault. I work at Boone County Family Resources, which is another county board. I traveled up here from Boone. I thank Sean for covering some of the information that I was going to cover. In Boone County, we serve, as of August 1st, 2,273 individuals with developmental disabilities. Okay, and so our property tax, our county levy, started in 1976. We also were able to go back to the voters to expand services, and they voted for an increase in 1993. So we've been doing it for a little bit, and part of why we do it is in the current state system, again, just the facts, the state system is really a crisis model. What developmental disability services look like are for people who are highest need, that need residential service, intensive services. The child that lives at home, whose parents are working and insurance doesn't cover the full expense of that adapted specialized wheelchair that they need, that's where we come in. Some of the other things that we do with our county revenues is help people purchase these items that aren't even covered by insurance, okay, if they have that, or Medicaid. And so like a communication device for a child with autism, those can be really expensive, thousands of dollars, $5,000. Okay, not everyone can use an iPad, right? We'll buy those, we'll help with shower chairs, a lot of things that help people be very independent in their community. So making sure we're good stewards of that county tax funding, okay, that we receive. We're very accountable. I follow, of course, the Hancock and all the rules. We're have a annual audit. All of our records are available. We're very transparent. Some of the other things that we do, I think that makes a difference. What do we do with this county money? Is there's gaps in service delivery between what the schools can do and for people that need that higher level of adult services. We really focus on teaching skills in the home, helping the parents receive some behavioral support services so their child can remain at home, like Sean talked about. Teaching life skills. Most kids learn these things that eventually, if you want a job or a girlfriend, you got to take a shower, right? Sometimes people need a little extra support in that. And so we will go in and we'll help give that guidance to the individual, to that family for more independence. We also are really work, I think Dennis mentioned it, the level of employment for people with disabilities is so terribly low. So we really focus in on that. So we're using those county dollars, those tax dollars, to help people find employment. I have an example where a young guy, I said to the staff, help me explain this to you guys, right? And they said, well, here's just, today's example. There was a gentleman that they started working with. He wouldn't follow a schedule. His mom couldn't get him ready for school. It was just, it's probably typical teenage things with a little extra. We came in, we helped balance this out, helped him learn some skills, then asked, well, what else do you want to do? Well, he wanted a job. The state system doesn't afford vocational training with Division of Vocational Rehabilitation with the state. You get referred when you are second semester senior of high school. So if you're just a teenager who wants to get a job, but you need a little extra help, that's where we come in. This guy, after 6 months of learning how to interview, how to dress, what questions to ask, where would you want to work, what's realistic, has a job now. And so we feel really strongly that we could demonstrate all sorts of different ways for that. I think as you're thinking of the property taxes and what should we do, I think our goal here is just to make sure you guys know that there's some really vulnerable people out there who truly benefit from the current property tax that each county has voted on or not voted on. It's the choice, right? And so in Boone, we know people value that and really, I want to say, we're part of that, but there's a lot of great reasons. People are moving to Boone. So anyway, that's really all I have.
You made it, you had 30 seconds.
I know, I
Good
wasn't
job.
looking
Good
at you.
job. Thank you, lady, for coming. Any questions for this witness? Oh. Okay, first I have Representative Steinhoff. You're recognized.
Thank you. As a Boone resident, I voted for those, and it's very clear what great work you do in our community. So I want to thank you for that, and I also want to thank you, and along with all the many other advocates that are here tonight. Not only are you doing this as your job, you're taking an evening of your own time to come down and continue to do that advocacy work for the people, because I know you're not going to get a raise for being down here. So
No,
all
but
of
we
you.
appreciate the opportunity to do this because
Yeah,
it is
well,
an important.
but thank you to all of you that are coming out tonight. I mean, I know many people are here to explain their story, which is just as important, but there's a lot of you that are here for other people, and I appreciate that.
Representative Fowler, you're recognized to inquire.
I thought you said Taylor. I don't know why you would say your own name, but no. Thank you. Appreciate the service that you do for your community. And I guess you mentioned in a sentence there, I think you used the word Hancock and audit, and very close together. And
Well, would you like me to expand?
yeah,
Sorry, I
so
jumped
if you, maybe you know enough about Hancock
No, I
relative to your,
understand Hancock.
and then does the state audit sometimes evaluate that, or do you have to send in paperwork to the state, that process?
No, I think where I was speaking to was this idea that we received this money and that we're good stewards of it, that we have, in addition to Hancock, all of the rules associated with being transparent and how we're spending this money and what it's going to. And so having an independent annual audit, following the Sunshine Law for transparency, all of those good things, that we're very much in tune to the idea of being good stewards and don't take that lightly.
It was a full audit of the
Yeah.
whole system and not just Hancock, then, is what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I got you.
Right, and we're audited, Department of Mental Health, Medicaid, all sorts of people. We want to think we're popular, but it's really,
All right, lady, I see no further questions. Thank you for
thank you,
coming.
guys.
Thank you for taking the time to come down and testify. So, Anita James, you're up. And on deck is Brad Turnbull.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for your time for being here and listening to us and giving us this opportunity. I know this is probably, your fifth meeting, and your probably eyes are glazing over from the same thing over and over. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Anita James. I'm the assessor from Knox County, Missouri. It's a little corner in the northeast corner, and it's a small county. Our population is around 4,500. I have 6,000 parcels that I deal with. When we talk about Senate Bill 190, my population for our county, very much, 60% of it is probably age 62 and over. I am knocking on that door myself. And so when we talk about freezing values, our concern is not where we're going to make up this revenue from somewhere else. It's what our services through our nursing home and our library and our health department and our ambulance and our school is going to take a toll, because as you've heard before tonight, all of these entities' expenses are not any cheaper. And we're diverse in the fact that when you need an ambulance, they're not going just a mile and a half to save someone, they're going 25 miles to save someone. So, I hate to see anything that would interfere with the services that our community gets, because they work very hard to provide. I am very fortunate. I was one of those counties that received an MOU from the State Tax Commission. When we talk about being over-assessment being the issue, 88 counties out of 114 received an MOU. They didn't receive that MOU because they were over compliance, they were under compliance. So I don't think as a whole, overassessment is our issue. Fair and equitable, could very possibly be. But when we talk about that, I take my job, I took an oath, as other assessors did, to uphold that true market value. So if it's higher than what someone really cares for, there is opportunity to come in and discuss that. If I have a value that's too high and I have a reassessment, that informal hearing is utmost of importance. I sent out 2,200 change letters this year. I had 85 phone calls. I had not one go to BOE. The BOE I did have was in personal property. So as far as over assessment in real estate, we are not experiencing that. But being able to do a good job and do it according to what our statute and what our oath was representing is what's important. When we talk about personal property and the values that are there, I think there's a lot of things that can be addressed there. I've often heard it told that personal property is an honest man's tax. And I believe that because I worked in our local sale barn for a number of years, and I knew how many cattle the next guy had. And when he turned it in on his sheet, it wasn't the same. And then when the disaster program kicks in, all of a sudden they want to flock in there because they know that that might be a source that they'll get pulled on to view it. So I know that there's discrepancy. I think we need to do a better job of coming up with resources for putting values on automobiles, farm equipment. You go from county to county as to how things are being done, and it ought to be uniform from county to county. I shouldn't have a landowner from St. Louis County calling me saying, how come you put my tractor on at this amount? They didn't do that down here. Why aren't our values matching? There's just so many things there that need to be addressed in the personal property perspective, because I know I had a grandmother that had a car that was 20 years old, and she was the first one to pay her tax bill every year. What an example she was for me. But not everybody feels that way. So if there's any questions, if there's no questions, my hard feelings won't be hurt.
Thank you, lady, for coming. Clarify for me, what percentage of seniors in your
I would say we're at 60%.
60%? And we all know that our rural areas are losing population, right? So we all know that.
So we are a farming community. Our biggest employer is a nursing home and school and local feed mill.
Yep.
So
appreciate it. Thanks. Representative Keithley, you're recognized to inquire.
Chair, I was going to ask this question to the State Tax Commission when they come up, but you kind of brought it up, so I'm wondering if I could maybe just get my answer a little sooner. You had brought up that there's 88 counties that received a memorandum of understanding from the commission, and all of those were under assessment.
I would assume so.
Are you, my question that I was going to ask, and you may not know the answer to this, and that's fine, I'll wait for the State Tax Commission if it's the case, but are there any counties that did receive a memorandum of understanding for being over the assessed value?
That I do not know.
Okay. Well, I'll wait for the answer. I will just say you said that you've cited that as evidence that we don't have an overassessment problem. It's evidence we have an underassessment problem. I would disagree with that. I think it's absolutely the only thing that tells me is we certainly have a State Tax Commission that's focused on the counties that they say are underassessing, and that doesn't necessarily mean no one's overassessing. It means we don't care when counties are charging too much. We only care when we think they're not charging enough. It's the same question I always have here. How come all the mistakes, all the benefit of the doubt in this property tax system seem to always work out towards the benefit of government and never to the taxpayer? And so, I'll wait for my answer, I think, on the overassessment question, but I do think it's important to point out that just because, it's survivor bias, right? When you're looking for something, all it's evidence of is what you're looking at, not evidence of what the actual underlying problem is.
I know a few years back, when my ratios were coming back, I kept working up, and I wondered at that time, what happens when you reach this point? Do you roll back? I never reached that point because the trend changed. So.
Thank you. Representative Reedy, you wanted to inquire? You were recognized.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for being here tonight, and thank you to, there's a lot of county officials from northern Missouri that's here tonight, and some from southern Missouri. I thank you all for being here and being interested in doing things that you're going to go back and you're going to help the people in your district. I think one thing I wanted to point out, and it was interesting to me, you said 62% of your people would qualify, probably
Around 60%.
around 60%. So that's kind of indicating to us in especially our rural areas, as our farmers are aging, a lot of them are going to be able to qualify for this. So it is going to make some really issues with the districts. And, when these districts have to treat this income as if they've got it in their future years as they set their levy, I could see, I've got some, I have a lake area, so I have a lot of retirees that move to the lake, and I have probably fire districts that 90 to 95% of the people in that district will qualify for the property tax freeze. And, I think about that, if your house catches on fire, or let's say your neighbor's house catches on fire, what do you want? You want the fire department there just to keep your house from burning. And so this is something that we worked on a couple years ago in committee to try to clarify some of that. Did not make it through, but I can understand where some counties still have some questions about Senate Bill 190 and how it's been implemented. Has your county implemented it?
No.
Your county has not, okay. Well, once again, I do appreciate you very much. Your testimony is very matter of fact, very to the point, and very factual, and I do appreciate the county officials that are here tonight, and I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I couldn't help, Representative, to point out that you corrected yourself, and it's the difference between urban and rural and fire departments, right? You started to say, keep my house from burning. Then you said, no, keep my neighbor's house from burning down, right? You switched that, so I caught that. Representative, the smarter half of the Taylor caucus, you are recognized to inquire.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much for coming and sharing some of the statistics on this year's process. You said that you sent out about 2,200 notice letters. If you could go into a little bit more of, you said 2,200 notice letters. You said you got about 85 phone calls and only a handful of appeals. My question,
I didn't have any real estate appeal.
my question is, do you feel that your county residents are aware of the appeals process? How well, why are you seeing so few appeals?
Yes. I have a good county. That's why I've been there since 2000.
I mean, you're sending notices, you're telling people that their property assessment is going up more than 15%. Why so few?
We did not go up 15%. I raised my index. My highest was 14%. So the bulk of mine did not raise that 15%.
What is the notice? What are these notice letters that you sent out?
Okay, it's a change of assessment. It shows that if I raise my assessment value raises $100, I send a letter.
Ma'am, do me a favor and move the mic a little bit so we're losing you. There are people online listening. So
Okay.
there you go.
So if their value increases at all, we send a letter, a written letter, so that they have the opportunity to come in and inquire. There's a phone number on there. There's a deadline that tells them when you can appeal to BOE. Most of mine always come in and talk to me, and when we find out, oh, well, we've missed something, we can make a correction. Good communication, I think, is the key with your constituents, and I can do that easily in a small county. I know that's not as easy in a larger county, but in my small county, I'm able to do that.
How long have you been the assessor?
I started working in the assessor's office in 1996 and then ran for office in 2008, and I've been there ever since.
Okay. From your own, experience, would you say people are aware? Do they understand the process if they want to appeal or reach out to you?
Yes, most of the time. We've gone through a transition in the last few years where I've had several out-of-county owners COVID kind of brought us new faces. That's brought an opportunity to get to know these people. But I think for the most part, yes, I think they do know the process.
Okay, thank you very much.
Representative Van Scoyk, you're recognized to inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here this evening. I appreciate your testimony very much. I heard something a little while ago about why we're always coming down the side of government instead of on the side of the people. How many fire districts are in your county?
We have volunteer fire departments, and then there is one that's located outside of our county that it creeps over into a piece of our
Okay.
county.
How many ambulance districts do you have?
We have one.
You have one. How many Senate Bill 40 boards?
How many what?
Senate Bill 40? None?
Knox County, yeah.
None in your county, okay. How many public libraries there's
One.
funded? Okay. So these are important to the people in your county, aren't they?
Very much.
Your people in the county voted to have these entities there and to fund them through their property tax, did they not?
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm from a small county, not as small as yours. I did mention, I think I mentioned your county when I made my opening remarks, that you're a small county. We've got a lot of small counties in North Missouri. And yeah, the people do know that there's a BOE process. They're well aware of it. But they want their fire department. They want their ambulance board. They want their Senate Bill 4 board. They want their library and their school. They want those things in their community. That's why when their assessments go up, they say, you know, maybe this is right, and I want to keep those entities going. That's how we are in rural Missouri, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Representative Boyko, you're recognized to inquire.
Thanks. Trying not to repeat, but along the same line, I was a little confused by the idea that you would think that someone would think that every advantage is sort of on the government side. And to explore that a little more, out of the 85 or so calls you got, how many of those calls were people who thought that your valuation of their property was higher than it should have been?
How many thought that mine was higher than what they thought?
That you had overvalued their property, so they would owe more in taxes? Is that most of them?
I'd say 10,
Okay.
and that'd be a high number.
And the other 75?
We're not going to argue.
What?
And we're not going to argue. They quit their conversation right there.
Oh, they were just fine with your?
Yeah.
Okay. So only 10 people really took, and did anyone call you to complain that your assessment was undervaluing their property?
No, but I've had that happen twice, though.
All right. See, and maybe I'm a dubious citizen. I've also been in the position of feeling like the assessor undervalued my property. And the thing is, the assessor didn't have a right to appeal that undervaluation. My neighbor, whose taxes, under Hancock sort of went up a few pennies because mine was undervalued, they didn't have a way to appeal my valuation either, right?
Right.
Whereas I've also been in the position where the assessor's overvalued it, and I've taken advantage of that process of calling the assessor and also doing the appeal. So I just wanted to point out, the process actually does favor the property owner, because if there is a mistake that's made in the property owner's favor, they get the advantage of that unless they're one of the two people who called you to complain.
We have a responsibility, but also so does the constituent. So, and it is a shared process.
I appreciate that. Thanks a lot.
Representative Williams, you're recognized to inquire.
Good evening. I had a question. When you received your memorandum of understanding, what percentage did the State Tax Commission say that you were in non-compliancy?
They did, well, my ratio come in at 77%.
Okay.
So my main question was, what's my plan? And so when I told them what my plan was, that, I signed it, they signed it.
And you believe that the property in your county is properly assessed?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do it.
And you live, you see the property, obviously your constituents agree with you that you're properly assessed.
I have no appraiser that works for me. I do my own assessment. Small counties can't afford an appraiser.
You're right.
And those voters expect to see my face at their door. So.
Well, I commend you in the work that you've done, and I know that being an assessor is extremely difficult, especially whenever you have someone weighing in on you that says that you're not properly assessing things. And so I commend all of the small counties that are out there doing the footwork to make sure that you're treating all of your constituents fairly. So thank you for that, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Seeing no further questions, ma'am, thanks for coming. Appreciate
you.
it. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you for this opportunity
You
again.
bet. Brad, you're up. Jason Sosman, I think I might say that right, is on deck.
I took not the path of least resistance to get here. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Brad Turnbull, and I serve as both the Quality Assurance Specialist and a Support Coordinator for County Connections, which is our local agency that provides case management services to individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. You've heard from a few other SB 40 boards around the area, and so I won't kind of go into some of the other stuff I had prepared as far as what that is. We know that, and so instead I just wanted to take a moment to kind of address, I just wanted to highlight that our funding really does help to fill service gaps that Medicaid doesn't cover. We've helped to fund adaptive technology that promotes independence for individuals. We help cover the cost of essential medical equipment or therapies that aren't funded by Medicaid or Medicare, and short-term supports that oftentimes can prevent temporary challenges from escalating into a costly long-term crisis. We firmly believe that addressing needs early, and when we help families, we can help them avoid more intensive and expensive Medicaid-funded services. So, in addition to some of those other things, we've really helped people fund things like home modifications for accessibility, getting people connected through social programs, and opportunities for self-advocacy and personal growth. We actually have you'll see submitted in writing for the record. We have a couple of those self-advocates who had submitted some things to you tonight as far as sharing why our services are important to them. And so truly, I just wanted to say that we acknowledge and understand that you have an incredible challenge ahead of you as far as balancing tax relief with maintaining really critical local services. And so I will also be quite straightforward in that I'm not fluent in the fine details of property assessments and tax things, but I really just wanted to take a moment to highlight that these incredible services that we provide people, these super critical things, are funded by county property taxes, and just wanted to take a moment to really help illuminate the potential impact that any sort of limit on local revenue can really have on these individuals. So thank you again. I really appreciate the opportunity to share, and I thank you for your service to all Missourians of all different abilities. So thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your testimony. Questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Jason, you're up. And then on deck, Liz.
Thank you, representatives. Thank you, representatives that came and participated in the audience. And thank you to the staff that's here doing all the hard work tonight. So I have actually developed software to help people appeal their assessed value.
Sir, did you introduce yourself?
Oh, I probably didn't.
No, if you did, do it again for us, will you?
I'm Jason Sossman. I'm from Adair County.
Thank you.
So, like I said, I have actually developed software to help people appeal their assessed value, because it can be a challenging thing. But, I know that there's several assessors here in the room tonight, and I've had the opportunity to speak with them, and they are actually doing a really good job. It's not an easy job, and I wanted to enlighten you a little bit on, you heard a lot about mass appraisal tonight. A very good way to show how mass appraisal works is two identical homes built on the same street by the same builder, built on the same day. Everything's identical. One is lived in by a gentleman that spends half of the year in Florida. The other one has a family with 5 or 6 kids in it. The gentleman that lived in, he maintained everything. He fixed every issue that came about. The family with the large family, well, you know, kids can get a little destructive, and their house was in disrepair. The gentleman's house that spent half the time in Florida leaves, decides he's going to sell his home. It brings $200,000. In mass appraisal, that house next door that's identical, square footage, everything's identical, now essentially gets a value of $200,000. And the reality is it's not worth that. Now that can go the other way as well. If the lower valued house sold, it can take away from the assessed value or the actual value of the home. So that gives you just a little snapshot as to what mass appraisal is. A lot of talk about assessment. One of the things that we do have here is about a 30-day window where people can appeal their assessment. That's not a lot of time. That actually puts an undue burden on the assessors because they have to gather all that information. The appeal process can go on much longer, but it does lump a lot of potential assessments. And, you know, we're not seeing it in our small rural counties, but if we look at some of the larger counties, I think Jackson County has as an absolute disaster over there, and there is a lot of people appealing because they did see some 100% increases on their assessment. So that might be something that the legislature should look at and maybe expand that a little bit. The two largest consumers of property tax are our schools and our county government. We need to keep that as local as we can. Local control is imperative. It's something that we need to. We have issues where we have some unfunded mandates. I just learned of one today, and that is the sheriffs got a significant pay increase to go along with the judges. But the state enacted that, but our counties are now responsible to pay that. That takes away from money that could be used to hire deputies. We need some help in our counties. All of our counties are struggling. Our rural counties are really struggling. In closing, we need to look at an area that it affects us directly here is out-of-state land ownership. I'm not talking necessarily about the foreign side of things. I'm talking about people from Iowa, people from Michigan, people from wherever. They're buying up our ground. They're not using it as farmland. They're using it as recreational land. Now, if we're going to change assessment, that's probably what we need to look at. We need to look at that as a key point because that is what's going to help. One county that's nearby has nearly a 60% out-of-state land ownership, and they're going in and they're tearing down the houses. I am opposed to increasing assessment on our farmers, on our active farmers. We need to stay away from that. Our farmers are struggling as it is, and we need to keep that assessment rate so they can remain profitable and they can keep ownership here in Missouri. Thank you.
Good timing, right down to the second. Gentlemen, before I ask if there are any questions, I have one. What county is it that has 60% out of state?
Mercer County.
Mercer County? Okay. Very good. Any questions for this witness? Representative Taylor, you are recognized to inquire as soon as you get a microphone.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, sir. Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You talked about the mass appraisal software, and you gave us one example. You talked about two homes probably built by the same builder. You talked about one of those homes maybe selling for $200,000. Does the software look at an average, multiple homes? It's not just that one sale that would dictate the sale of my home next door. Wouldn't it be an average of multiple? That's the mass component of it?
That is correct. They are looking at like homes. Age is a huge factor in home values. Square footage, style, build style, everything goes into that. There's a pretty large there's a pretty large factoring that goes into it. I just gave a quick example.
Well, I think what's important, though, is that we want people to understand that the appraisers are looking at multiple homes, multiple transactions, and then they're trying to adjust for age and square. And that's really what I wanted to talk to you about is it sounds like within your software, you're taking into consideration some of these other factors, but fundamentally, we start with a large number or as many sales as we can. Sir, does that include sales that are outside of a time period? Could I use sales that were 2 years, 3 years old, possibly, to do an appraisal?
I believe in most cases, the software that's used today is within a couple years. The assessors could answer that probably better than I could because it's in their system of how they function.
Okay. I think the point that I want to just drive in is it's not just that my next door neighbor's house sold. It really is an average of many houses. And I try and look at, of those many houses, I try and pick things that are close by within the same school district, within the same area. I try and look at, and I'm inquiring with you because I want your help here. I look at the square footage. The size of the house would be a factor. The number of bathrooms, would that be a factor? There are a lot of these factors, hence, and that's why during these hearings I ask people if they're aware and if they engage in the appeals process. You offer this software as an aid to help people. What's your experience when you talk to people? How knowledgeable are people about the opportunity to appeal and how they should prepare for that appeal?
What I have found is there's, and it's, I will say that it's not necessarily, this specific software is not great here in Missouri, high tax states, but it can be used anywhere. So, what I have found is individuals are starting to look, as tax rates are going up, they're looking at what defines their taxes. And their taxes are set by a levy and by an assessment rate. So that, they're starting to look at that as to how they can save money.
Okay. And you're helping them with understanding the assessment portion of that.
Correct.
Looking at the different factors, looking at multiple sales and what that average would be, as well as other conditions of the house.
Correct. You cannot appeal your taxes, but you can appeal your assessment.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Chappell, you're recognized for inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sir, thank you for being here tonight. You said something that caught my attention a little bit. You suggested that part of the problem was out-of-state ownership. What is it about that specifically that is problematic?
Well, one of the significant factors when these out-of-state buyers are buying this ground strictly for recreational use, if there's a home on that property, they don't want to deal with it. They tear it down. That is taking away from the tax base. There is, when you look at farmland or timber ground or recreational land, however you want to define it, it's obviously assessed at a much lower rate. And the reason for that is to help support the farming industry. I mean, it's our local farmers. If they had to, if you know what land sells for today, we're seeing land that 5 years ago was selling for, $2,500 an acre, and now it's selling for $6,000 or $7,000 an acre, and it's really just recreational land. If we start using those comps and change the assessment rate for our local farmers, we're not going to have any local farmers. They're going to be out of business because if their taxes on that property increase that much, they will not be able to stand.
So the issue is not, if I understand what you're saying correctly, the issue is not the fact that the property owner may or may not be out of state, but the issue is that a property owner may tear down a home that was previously on there, and so therefore the property then gets reestablished as being agricultural rather than residential. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, I think it was already probably, if it was on a large tract of farm, it was already considered a agricultural property. It just had a home on it that was assessed as being a residential.
I see. All right, thank you.
Representative, you recognize. Go ahead and continue.
So but that's okay for a Missourian to do, to go ahead and do that, in your opinion? So to tear down and use their property for recreation, but we don't want out-of-state people doing that. Doesn't that still do the same thing?
I think what we're starting to see is such large numbers of out-of-state individuals. They're not here. They're not paying personal property tax. They're spending 4 or 5 days here. They're not adding to our economy.
So wouldn't they be buying things here, buying fuel, buying groceries while they stay here? So they would be adding to our economy, would they not?
Well, 4 or 5 days a year compared to an individual that is living here year-round, I don't know. If I do the math on that, I'm going to say that our resident is probably going to spend more money here.
But they're also requiring more services that live here. Those that are not here aren't requiring as many services. Would you say that would be correct?
In a sense.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Harbison, you're recognized.
Thank you for being here. I guess I have a concern here in your intent on what it would do as far as the individual to sell whoever they wanted to sell the property to. When we talk about foreign ownership, I understand security issues. But I don't know if we want to get in the business of telling our local people they cannot sell to certain individuals and getting into the property rights to where we, manage individuals who they can and cannot sell property to. I mean, I understand your concern. I'm a farmer. I'm all about, our county, but the problem we have one county that's 40% owned by the state and the federal government. It's not going to be improved either. But I mean, when it comes to private property rights and telling individuals who they can and cannot sell to, I guess that's the challenge that I would have in a situation like that.
Okay. With all due respect, I never once said that we would not allow our landowners to sell to somebody. I said we should look at changing the definition of that land to be more of a recreational land as it is, which would change the assessment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Yes, sir.
So it would be fair that almost creating a new category of land then?
That's correct.
So that's where you'd be going with that thought process. Okay. Representative Reedy, you're recognized. Please continue.
When you're talking about this land that is vacant ag land that is not used for agricultural use, it can be, under the present law, it can be classified as vacant unused land, valued at market value and assessed at 12%. So there's also already that provision there if the assessor wants to do that. In our county, when we first implemented it, it was before I became assessor in '92, so that tells you a long time ago. The old assessor and I drove the county. We looked at every piece of property because we're in a lake area, a lot of timberland, and if there wasn't an agricultural activity going on that property, it's valued at market value and it goes at 12% instead of productivity values. So that law's already on the books. All they have to do is decide to use it.
Well, I greatly appreciate that information.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to come testify. Appreciate it. Liz Miles, you were on deck, and then you were going to be the last witness, but I was also going to call out and see if there were any last minute. I do know that Aaron, I don't know his last name, from Daviess Counties wants to be, so you are going to be recognized as being on deck. So please, ma'am.
All right, I appreciate the opportunity to talk. I did not come in here with the intention of talking, so a few things have piqued my interest, and I wanted to mention. So I am Liz Miles. I'm the assessor in Shelby County. I've just got voted into my 4th term, so I'll be starting that in September. So I just wanted to kind of go back to the reassessment word. The idea of having another reassessment like we did in the 80s, and those figures of money, it was a little scary, 121 million, I think you said, and now we're estimating that might cost 366 million. But I just wanted to bring to light, I think the word reassessment is a little bit strong. I mean, we've already collected all of our data. I'm going to assume every assessor here has measured houses and, things that they had to do in the 80s that we would not have to do again. I think there's a lot of, I don't think we'd have to totally recreate the wheel here. I think there's just some restructuring that we need to do.
Maybe a reset, resetting.
That's kind of what I think.
It was pointed out to me that reassessment statewide was on the heels of the Hancock Amendment when it started. So we would have had to start a new baseline perhaps at that point. So, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay, because, I wasn't, of course, in the assessor's office at that time. I was just a young girl, but I do, I know before then, or at least I don't believe that they had houses measures. I don't believe that they were assessing land, by the acreage like we do now. I know the studies were done for the soil. There's just been so many things that are still there and still good. Most of us, if we don't have GIS in our own counties, we can get on Google Earth, So we shouldn't really be in an issue now where we have buildings that aren't being assessed. I would hope, I think we all try to do our best and get out there and assess things properly. There's a couple other things I wanted to mention here. I've written some notes, just if you'll give me 1 second. I will just kind of give you a little history of since I've been the assessor in Shelby County and kind of where my ratio's been and what's happened. And so in the 2021 cycle, I was at 97%, just about where an assessor would like to be, Before that, I think, I was kind of trickling down slowly, but COVID hit, 22, 23, I went to 78. That year in 2023, I raised 5% across the board in the residential class. But even with that, by the time we get to my 24, 25, I was at 73%. And so I did sign an MOU and I raised 14% in Shelby County. Like Anita in Knox County, I had some phone calls. Let's see, I think I mailed out about somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000 impact notices, and I received 90 phone calls or people coming in to visit. Mostly, they were just confused, needed to understand the process. Shelby County has not adopted SB 190 either. 29 people, I had reason to change their parcels, whatever the reason may have been, a misunderstanding or something. I didn't realize things were in worse shape. So no one went to BOE. No one even called the clerk to inquire about BOE. So, and I think I'm kind of like Anita. People, they know we need those services, but I think they also know that we're, just the way the market is, that we're undervalued. And I think that they realize that, and at least that was the information I was getting back from people when they came in, because many of them would say, well, I wouldn't sell my house for that. And even where I am now, they wouldn't sell their house for, So even though it is a hardship, I think they realize. So unless we're going to change assessing on a fair market value, I think we're going to have to continue to creep up to where the fair market value is. I wrote down a couple other things. I appreciated you bringing up, Vice Chair Reedy, that the SB 190, because I've thought about that. If they're getting my assessed valuation for the whole county, senior citizens and all, how are they going to know what to set their tax levy if they don't know who's going to qualify for that? They don't know what they're going to lose, so how can they properly set a tax levy? So that was one other question that I had that I wanted to mention and bring up. I think that was all that I
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for testifying. Questions for this witness? Representative Hales, you're recognized to inquire.
Thank you for your testimony. Really simple question. You said that you had about 3,500 to 4,000 notices sent out. How many total parcels do you have?
We have about 6,600. And so we raised every residence 14%. I mean, I did a full review, so there were some that obviously I thought wasn't worthy of that, or that they were in worse condition than before. We also raised our residential land class 14%, and I actually raised most ag buildings 14% also, because we've been behind on the construction costs. And then also I raised commercial land 14%.
And can you remind me again how many phone calls and appeals?
90, about 90.
And did you have any appeals?
No.
Okay, thank you so much.
Representative Taylor, you're recognized to inquire.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. You started off talking about the reassessment, and fundamentally, assessors are looking at property probably all throughout the year, but you have an assessment every 2 years. So you talked about, the fact that given that you're doing these assessments, you're staying on top of it. You don't necessarily know that it's necessary. Do you think there are any benefits to, undergoing such a large cost undertaking for a reassessment? Are there any benefits that we should be looking to achieve?
I think in revamping or re-looking at it, tweaking the things that are wrong, I don't think we need to go gather data again, and remeasure every house or.
If we looked at it by category, is there one or two categories in particular that we might see a value in reassessing? Agriculture or commercial? Or again, do you think that across the board you're on top of it and fairly accurate already?
I'm not that accurate because, like I said, I'm at 73%, and I just raised 14%, and I'll be surprised if my next ratio isn't. When I get sales back, I'm lucky if I hit 60%. So I really don't even know how I'm at 73%, if you want to know honestly, because there's so many outliers, and you've got some, I don't know that I've come across any that I'm overassessed on. So I think it's just, you've got some that I'm not as underassessed as others, but I think as a whole, at least in my county, I'm finding that I will be surprised. This isn't going to push me up into tolerance. Going up this 14%, I believe if nothing changes, I will have to do it again in 2 years.
Okay. And then my second question, when you send out the notices and people call you, they say, oh, you assessed me at this rate, and the quote, I couldn't sell my house for that. What's your response? How do you respond to that when people say?
Usually I just say, well, according to the market, you're right. Because right now I'm actually working with I'm in the process of going to the new manual, but I couldn't get there this cycle, so I have to work with kind of two systems right now, where I went up 14% from 2 years ago, and where I have it set where my fair market value should be. So I was able to, on a couple of those, to show, well, this is actually, if I were in market, this is where you would be, and nobody really disagreed. The few that said that, nobody really disagreed with that. So I'm able to look at where potentially I should be to be in compliance and where I'm actually assessing.
When you give them the assessment and you tell them a number, this is based on some actual sales, some actual transactions. You have concrete, real data that says this transaction, that transaction. An individual that comes back to you and says, well, I couldn't sell my house for that, are they talking from gut feeling, or do they also bring to you, other data points, real data to justify that?
I think you may have misunderstood me. They're saying I wouldn't sell my house for that, like meaning I don't have enough on it. They're not saying I have too much. They're saying I'm undervalued.
They're telling you that you undervalue.
They're saying, when I asked them if they're complaining, they're saying, well, I wouldn't sell my house for that, meaning, yeah, I can't complain then. If you're saying that's what my house is worth and I wouldn't sell it for that, how can I complain?
Okay.
I'm sorry. I
thought it was the other way around, because I do get into discussions with folks, and they say, you overassessed my property. You say that it's worth some number, and I could not. The market would not pay me that.
Sure.
And I'm explaining to them that, well, the market is real data, and we're looking at an average.
I'm sorry that I didn't make that understandable. That is
all
what
right, thank you.
Yeah, I didn't have anyone against
Thank you both. All right. Seeing no further questions, ma'am, thank you for coming down to testify.
Thank you all.
My apologies. I didn't. Representative Keithley, you were recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just briefly wanted to answer one question that you raised about SB 190 and the tax levies. How do they know what the levies are? SB 190 shouldn't affect the levies. The levies are supposed to be calculated regardless of how many seniors are in the taxing jurisdiction, and then the credit comes off after that. So the whole idea is to not put that burden onto other people. So it's calculated after, the credit is returned after levies go through.
Right, but then they're going to lose part of that money, so they're not really getting what they think they're levying, I guess is what I'm...
Right, there's a credit that returns to control the future
Correct.
revenue growth going on. Yeah,
So that would make it hard
the
for an
idea is not
entity.
to like always constantly guarantee that revenue is always going to, meaning the tax burden on the taxpayer as a whole is going to constantly grow. But that's the answer to the question. It really doesn't impact the total levy at all. That is the idea. My question for you is on you basically said across the board, all agriculture, other residential, it sounded like everything pretty much went up 14%.
Besides ag land, of course,
Okay.
we can't touch that.
As I understand it, at 15%, it triggers a visit to the actual property, right?
Correct,
Okay,
yes.
so I mean, 14% is essentially the maximum you can raise
Correct.
without actually having to go to the property.
Well, I
to do
will
the
say, I
assessment.
do a full review. I do not get out and walk around every house, but I do my own review, and I look at every property in Shelby County.
You expressed shock and are kind of surprised that you were at 73% when you just went up 14%. Again, I would go back to what a previous speaker talking about how 88 counties came back at underassessed. And sometimes I think the issue may not be the 88 counties. The issue might be the other 26 counties that are putting you guys out of whack. You're at 73%. It's all relative. If we're calling the counties that have gone way overboard, and we know the problems in Jackson County, and we're going to make them the new normal, then you can raise 14%, and you're still stuck at 73%. You're like, how am I not keeping up when I just went up 14%?
Well, we don't have to keep up with Jackson County. We keep up with our sales in Shelby County. We're not compared against each other. We keep up with our own sales, which I send out to the buyer and the seller. I get back my sales data. I verify those
So
sales.
how do we figure out that you're undervalued? Are you undervalued compared to 73% compared to other counties
No,
around you?
I'm undervalued 73. I'm at 73% compared to my sales that are selling in Shelby County, Missouri.
Compared to
Yeah,
so the
to the
do
sales
you guys
that I
have
get back.
certificate of sales in Shelby?
We mail out voluntary sales information.
Okay, how much of that do you get back? Do you know?
We do decent because we send to the buyer and seller, so sometimes the buyer's more willing to, or the seller's more willing to give us information than the buyer.
Okay.
But I don't think we even get back 50, 60% of what we mail out.
That's my question. When we put out 73% evaluation, I'm just trying to figure out how confident we really are that you are undervalued and where that information is coming through, because our data in a lot of these counties just isn't really there to really properly assess that
I mean,
market.
if we want to open another can of worms, why don't we have homeowners, why don't we make it disclosed to where they have to tell us what they pay for property?
Thank you.
I mean, that's how we're assessing or taxing vehicles, so.
It's a topic that comes up in every one of our meetings about that particular
Right.
issue.
I mean, it would make it more
Yeah.
fair and equitable and more data. So, thank
Okay.
you all. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right. Representative Williams, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thank you for being here. When you received, what were your sales that you sent to the State Tax Commission whenever they asked for your sales data? Like, what was your number? Did you submit 1,200 sales, 400 sales?
No, I'm in Shelby County. Maybe over what they pull, I really don't know off for a fact, but I'm going to guess 50 sales would be.
Okay, and then did they come back and say, well, we're only going to qualify 25 of those sales? Or did they use the same amount?
They didn't throw out a lot of mine.
Okay. All right.
Most of them were used.
So it's pretty accurate.
Sure.
And do you feel like you do, that your homes are properly assessed, and you feel like you do a fair job?
I mean, as well as they can be for an outside mass appraisal. You know, they're not perfect, and that's why I try to have an open door for my taxpayers to come in and visit with me. I'm always willing to go look inside a house or do it, investigate further if needed, for sure.
All right, thank you. That's all I needed.
Yep, thank you.
All right, see no further questions. Thank you, ma'am, for
Thank
coming
you.
to testify. Okay, we got to the end of the official list. We have a little time. So there are a couple of people I understand who want to testify. So Aaron, where are you? Aaron, you're going to be the first. I'm going to put a time limit on this, 2 minutes, and clarification questions only from the committee if he says something. So, and a couple other things. Aaron, I need you to fill out a witness form. Did you do that?
I've
Okay.
got to write the thought when I get done.
Okay, be sure you fill that out, and then also fill out the rest of this form that I'll get with you
Okay, will do.
afterwards. So, all right, 2 minutes, sir, go ahead.
Thank you for letting me speak here. My name's Aaron Pyburn. I'm the assessor in Davies County. Just kind of wanted to hit topics of some of the questions that had been asked tonight. So in my county, we're a third-class county. We have roughly $178 million of assessed evaluation. Of that, 70% is real estate, 30% is personal property. The county has received in 24's budget $670,000 worth of sales tax, which is only a fraction of the money that would be received to the local taxing entities if either personal were cut and/or real estate. Just some of the topics that were hit, the Hancock Amendment, for example, this year was set at CPI. I think a lot of the concern or loophole questions about the Hancock Amendment is you first take this is my understanding of it, you take new construction out of it up front. Well, we have personal property that is included in that, so any growth in personal property, whether it be increase of value per item, which we had a bill this year that prevented that, or if it was a new item. So the taxing entities were automatically able to take that out of their rollback amount, whether it be growth or increase of quote-unquote reassessment of personal property. Within that, my understanding is that you then take your reassessment percentage. So for example, in my county, we saw roughly a 13.2% increase. I sent out roughly 7,400 increase notices to my constituents. I have roughly 11,500 parcels. Of that, I received roughly 450 informal conversations. I had 0 BOEs. This was brought up, I did have one person with concern that I undervalued their property. We are working on a mass appraisal system. I sent out sales letters for every single property that we sell that is not specifically ag land, because we have 0 control, and that's a waste of postage in my opinion. Within that, we got 56 sales back from that over the 3-year period that we used within my ratio. I did come in at 58%. Obviously, I am undervalued. We did increase with that. I think stopped, but.
It's okay. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, I'm going to give you 1 minute to finish your thought. 1 minute.
Okay.
Go ahead, on my time.
So some other concerns that I have that I think would be a potential fix with this is, not to open a can of worms, but with Senate Bill 190, as those taxing entities do send out, I believe the collector has a responsibility by the middle of November, please correct me if I'm wrong, to send out a notification to those entities about how much money they are going to lose. I think the concern is that money's not able to be kept by increasing that levy and passing on to its constituents, but it's also going to be a loss of service to all the constituents who use it. I think that's one big concern that people have. The other is the cost of parcel reimbursement. Right now we get $3.30. I believe statute says we can go up to $7 with a percentage increase each year after. That is up to the State Tax Commission to recommend that to the legislative body. Memorandums of MOUs versus maintenance plans. The State Tax Commission sends out maintenance plans every 2 years for us to abide by. This year they started with the MOUs that we've all heard, et cetera, but.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you for your testimony. I have one follow-up question. Are you Senate Bill or SB 190 County?
We are.
You are. Okay.
We had roughly 600 applicants this year on its first year.
Is your county they have to sign up every year? Did you freeze it at the year that it was implemented? How does it work?
So the county implemented this year to use a base year of 2024, and they don't have to reapply, they reapply, but they don't have to do all the paperwork. They just continue. No changes have happened.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Thank you. Who is the other individual who would like to? That was only one? Okay. All right. So we're doing pretty good, all right? Some of these meetings have gone on 5 hours and 40 minutes. We're doing pretty good. So the State Tax Commission is up next and last, so if you all will come up. Now, I only gave them about 5 minutes last week because the building we were in actually closed at 9 o'clock. We can have a little more time to discuss things. So if you will do the introductions as you normally do, as you speak. If you get up to speak, then introduce yourself, and I'll let you start, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Gary Romine, Chairman of the Missouri State Tax Commission. With me, I have Commissioner McGinnis, Commissioner Razor, Legislative Liaison Dan Hutton, and General Counsel Greg Osbury. We appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening and get a chance to maybe wrap up some things. First of all, the STC has proposed every year in our legislation request to the General Assembly COV. We want the assessors to have as most accurate tools that they can have to do their job, and we think COV would go a long ways to do that. But we also realize that that data has to be protected. And it's no secret, the Realtors Association will kill any kind of COV bill if it gets out there unless, and we've been talking to them, unless we can find a way to protect that data so that only the recorder and the assessor has access to it. It can't be sunshine. That information can't be collected. So first thing we ask is if you can do something with COV, I think would be critical to help the assessors to be able to do more accurately their job in determining market value. Second thing, Hancock Amendment. One of the first things we recommend is the consideration of each subclass being able to trigger Hancock. And I think that and this is you guys and the people that's been at these hearings that have helped us to formulate these opinions. So it's, we've thought about them, we've talked about them, but a lot of this has come from the efforts of this committee and what's taken place. But that would be the first thing we would look at on the Hancock. The other thing is any other...
Do me a favor, I apologize, I missed that. Tell me again what that...
To be able to have each subclass be able to individually trigger Hancock. Right now, it has to be the aggregate.
Okay, understood.
And so, and then the second part is if there's any fixes that seem to be needed. I mean, there's innuendo that there's some loopholes or there's some varying ways that some of these taxing authorities can adjust certain levies, but there's some hard questions that need to be asked. What are those? Let's find out what they really are and see if they're real, and if they are, try to fix them. But the Hancock Amendment would allow an opportunity for the assessors not to be the bad guys. Assessed valuations go up should not be an increase in the constituents' taxes. CPI is 2.9. That should be the max that we should see. But we realize and we know that some of the assessors that have gone up 14%, some of their constituents are going to see 7, 8, 9, 10% increase in their tax bill because they won't fully realize the 2.9. So with that, also, statewide reassessment, I don't think it's realistic. I mean, we're talking about $366 million as a guess. That's a huge price tag. Money better spent would be to let us recommend a higher parcel count rather than $3.30 and provide the assessors with a little more additional funds per year to hire staff, to get more boots on the ground, to be able to do the job that they are required to do. And I would be open to a number that you think we can present this year, but as you know, as an agency, every year we have to present to the governor our budget request. And one of those requests is how many dollars per parcel count that we want to allocate. We've asked for several years for a higher amount and have been adjusted back. So we need support, we'll ask for support, and this will be the first time with Governor Kehoe on this issue to really be fully engaged. So we're ready to pursue a higher number, and we think that would be dollars better spent, giving to the assessors the tools that they need rather than a statewide reassessment. With that, any of the members have any items to bring up? With that, we want to make sure we provide an opportunity for questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will start with, I'm going to start with the first two anyway. And first will be a comment. So to that talk about the parcel count, there are a number of us who sit on the budget committee on this committee right now. So when that time comes, know that you will have us there to inquire of the budget chair, if you will. Speak to me about Sheridan County's assessor was here, the very first person who testified about the railroads and how those things, the value of those railroad companies and what you all, not pointing fingers at you all specifically, but what the end number ended up being.
The issue with state assessed properties is, as Darren had said, you take the company as a whole, nationwide, its true value, or its value, and then whatever portion of that is in Missouri is allocated from Missouri's portion of their assessed valuation. With the unitary assessment process, that's different than assigning value per unit or per railroad, per boxcar. It's not individualized. It's based upon their books and the books that they provide in their total assessed value.
They wouldn't doctor their books in any way to affect that, would they?
We try very hard to monitor that and grab as much information. One of the things that I've asked as a commissioner is, can we get their FERC 1 reports showing what they're turning into the feds on this same data so that we can do a comparison? Sometimes that data is hard to find, and we, just to be honest, we question sometimes whether or not we're getting the full data, and we challenge it, and we do look as hard as we can to get the additional information. And if it's all right with you, I would like to get a little bit more information from my new manager in centrally assessed property to get more details specific to Darren's question, provide you with a more in-depth answer to that.
Yes, I'd appreciate that, and I know he would, and many others would as well. The second question I have is, what can you tell us about, we talked a bit in depth about the statewide reassessment process. What, do you guys have anything to add to that? The benefits of that, and excluding the insurmountable cost, as it seems.
I don't think with the new camera systems, with the satellite imagery that we have, you wouldn't have to have as many boots on the ground. So I don't think the $122 million equated to today's dollar would actually be the dollar amount that it would take to do a statewide reassessment. But with the amount of effort that's been taken in this last couple of cycles, I think if we continue to do what we're doing with the addressing the issues with our local techs or local assistants, meeting with the assessors, working with assessors, and raising their assessed value, raising the ratio amounts, various things like that, we're taking a path to getting equalized assessment. But the issue, again, is do we question whether or not the value that they're working, the market value that they're working with, is accurate? And the couple assessors that come up, and we're proud of the fact that they work very hard to do their assessments. They're very confident they have assessed properties based upon the information they have. Voluntarily turning in sales data is not the most accurate. It really skews, I think, the numbers. And so having, again, back to COV would improve that.
Thank you. Representative Keithley, you're recognized to inquire.
I think I picked up another question on that because I don't think I'm understanding. How I understood what you said regarding the national businesses on it was it's compared to what they have in their portfolio or what they have in their valuation as a whole. It's not like if I have 10,000 square feet of office space in Manhattan and then 10,000 acres of land in Missouri, I'm not paying like 99% of my total business valuation in Missouri because all the land's here, right? That's what I understand you say, but I'm assuming that's not right.
No, it's basically your book value of your business, and then we take a look at how much book value is in Missouri and take a percentage of that and multiply it times your total value. It's a little more complicated than that. That's oversimplifying, I'm sure. But
I can take that one offline because I think I'm just struggling. This is today it's the first night I've heard about that process, a separate evaluation process for that. So I think I just haven't struggled right my head around. But my other question was the same from before, just simply how, if there's any MOUs out there for counties that are over the assessment amount, compared to all the ones that are for under.
Well, we had to take it a step further with Jackson County. We had to have an equalization order that mandated that they could not have more than 15% increase in assessments because they didn't do proper notification and inspections.
That's different than a memorandum of understanding. So there may not be
It's a step further.
Okay.
I mean.
There's not an MOU, there's something else more kind of
Yes,
severe. Okay.
this is more heavy, and we had to take it to court, and we ended up winning the court case. We had to have preventive measures and issue a second equalization order so that Jackson County, for their 25 assessment cycle, even though they're appealing the decision of the courts, this will get a little complicated, we were still mandated that until that decision, our decision in the court stands, they had to take 22's value and produce no more than 15% for 23, no more than 15% for 25. And so that, based upon their Form 11s that we have seen, they have abided by that equalization order. So yes, we did control and limit that they could not raise values more than 15%.
Okay.
Up to.
Because I didn't see the MOU at any point for Jackson, so that makes sense why I wouldn't have found an MOU for Jackson County.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the clarification on that.
Representative Boyko, you're recognized for an inquiry.
Thanks. I have a couple questions. I'll start with what's probably the easiest. They all deal with the per parcel reimbursements. So the first is, I'm just curious about the history of the amount that's been over time, and I suspect the answer is we can get that to you later,
Well,
or maybe someone on staff knows, but.
I can give you the cliff notes in that 2005, the foundation formula was changed. And so that changed the concept of how much assessed values really played as far as the state was concerned. And so there wasn't as much emphasis on making sure that the assessed values, I'll just be honest, in each county, it wasn't as important. I mean, we went from roughly 100 employees, we're down to 37. And the State Tax Commission is still trying to do the same job. Because of that, the top range for the per parcel was $7. And so it got reduced down to the range of $3 for the last several years that I've been on the commission, because it's still, they have an important job to do. As you can see, we've had all these meetings, and they've been stifled by the fact that with limited resources and the underappreciated, I feel like, of the need for the assessment process to still continue to be at the level that it should be professionally. Just because the foundation formula changed should not have changed the value of the assessment process.
Okay, and then am I right that your office can use that as sort of a carrot or stick for compliance if you have an assessor who's always undervaluing or otherwise not in compliance? You can use withholding of that as a tool?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then if, let's, in a hypothetical world where we doubled what that was, it's 6.5 or something like that, could you maybe explain some of the kinds of things that assessors might be able to do that they can't do now? And in particular, what I'm curious about is whether we could do an increase that was a one-time thing and get a lot of the benefit, or if it would need to be an increase that was perpetual or even tied to inflation increasing.
Well, as we talk about the Hancock, if they go above a certain level, Hancock kicks in, and tax rates cannot be any more than 2.9 other than the variations from these other taxing authorities. So that would be the...
Well, I'm going to stop you. I think you misunderstand. I mean, the reimbursement, the per parcel reimbursement that the state is giving to the assessors, if we were to double that, not that the assessments would double.
Well, and I understand that with that amount of money, they would have more funds to hire staff and the various things that they would need to be able to do that job. That's the most important part of what the parcel reimbursement funds are. That's what the money, that's the title, that's what the money's about, is making sure they have funds to be able to go out and do the steps that it's taken to assess the property properly. And so with the additional funds, and again, our local assistants, we've been able to work real well with the assessors to the point we may have sent out 80-something MOUs, but as of right now, we have 106 that have come in compliance with those MOUs. So we've worked together, and we've done various things with some of these counties to help them get into compliance and make those adjustments. So again, our office is more than ready to work with the assessors and accommodate them, and if they had the funds, it would make the job easier for both of us.
And so part of my question, which is probably the unanswerable part, is if we were to invest a significant amount into increasing those reimbursements, could we expect a 1% improvement on the accuracy of assessments, or a 10% improvement, or a 20% improvement? And again, I don't think that's necessarily an answerable question, but that's one of the ones that we have to figure out on our side too.
Well, and I appreciate that. I understand that's part of the thought process. But again, with the oversight that we have been assigned, we would like to think that between us and the assessor, we would make good use of those funds to provide the best service for our constituency. That would be our goal.
Representative Steinhoff, you're next. Recognized to inquire.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, it's okay.
You only have to thank me one time.
Well, I want to also follow up on your question about asking if you all wanted to respond to the railroad, but there were also 3 other things that were brought up, and I heard you mention that you were going to do a little more research, and I just want to make sure, were you going to do a little more research on all 3? So I can remind you what they are if that would help.
Please do.
Okay, so the first one was ag. Talking about the Mizzou study said that the value of ag should be tripled, and that your recommendation was not. I didn't know if you wanted to
When we
respond
held
to
our
that.
hearing 2 years ago, we had 0 testimony to increase ag land values. The only information that was provided to us was the Mizzou study. We had half a dozen in opposition, usual folks, Farm Bureau, Cattlemen's Association, so on. We had no support for increasing ag land values. So that hearing is very important to me. When I chaired Education Committee, if I let a bill out of my committee that had 0 support, I wouldn't be comfortable with that. And so as a commission, based upon 0 support for increasing land value, production land value, it didn't happen.
And did I understand correctly, then that would be your recommendation, but then we would still vote on that? So if you had recommended some sort of increase, is that how that would work? You would make it a recommendation, and then we would vote whether to approve
Correct.
that or not?
And that's coming up in a couple of months. This is the every 2-year cycle. We anticipate the report from MU coming out in the next few weeks, and so we'll get a chance to see what actual numbers that represents, and we will conduct our hearing at that time to see what kind of response we have for recommendations.
Okay, another one that was brought up was the pipeline, and I think we did hear more about that later, but I didn't know if you wanted to respond to that.
Let me get more detail.
Okay.
What's on, in regards to the pipeline, I must have missed.
I think it was just that they were promised some revenue that didn't end up coming in. I don't know if it was because of evaluation. Greenville. Okay. And then the last one was the South Missouri mine, the appeals.
And that's very personal to me, I'll be honest with you. I was state senator over that area at the time that was going through the process. My legislative director at the time was Dan. We worked with both parties extensively trying to come up with language to create a standard operating procedure for assessing mines, particularly the mine in that area. We could not reach an agreement between the parties, and so therefore we did not end up with a piece of legislation that I dearly wanted to come to a unequivocal answer to how to assess Doe Run Mine. I mean, that was important, but we couldn't reach a consensus on it, and so the legislation never was presented. And so I'm sorry for that. I spent a lot of hours and time in it. I know Representative asked me when the appeal come to the State Tax Commission, did I abstain or vote? Based upon the data I had, I felt like it was my responsibility to make a vote on it. I did not abstain. I voted based upon the data and information that was before me, the court decision that was before us, and the fact that I knew how much the school districts in the area were suffering because that money was in escrow. Some of those school districts had to borrow against that escrow to survive. We wanted resolution. All of us wanted resolution to that issue. And to drag it out, if we would have made a different decision and it got appealed, it would have drug out longer. They eventually went to Springfield to the court to have it reviewed, and they come up with an amicable agreement. The best I understand, in Springfield, Mr. Alsbury could probably explain that a little bit more, but that issue was settled by a different tribunal, or final tribunal after us.
Well, I think each of these are really important because we know that it then puts more burden on the residential side, which is what we're hearing a lot of in these hearings. So thank you for that information. I have two other quick questions. You brought up one of your recommendations tonight is that the subclasses could individually trigger Hancock. I want to make sure I'm understanding from just learning from these hearings. That's already in law, is that right? But
No.
only one county has opted in to use that?
Well,
Is that-
right.
It's optional.
It's optional at this point.
So I guess I'm wanting to know, is your recommendation to take that law and make it required and not optional?
I mean, the way the law is...
Don't forget to introduce yourself.
Yeah, Dane Hutton, Legislative Liaison, State Tax Commission. The way it currently operates, even if you have a multi-rate system, it is still, compared to the aggregate in each individual subclass of property, can be adjusted accordingly to match the single rate. So what we would propose is just to eliminate all of that and just have each subclass of property and personal property in the aggregate each triggered individually. That way, if residential goes up and triggers it, it at least, it's a countywide measurement, but it at least realizes all the benefit that it triggered. That's the goal.
Okay, so that it's having different rates instead of one rate that's taking all of them in?
Yes, it's multi-rate, because then if one's adjusted, then it's different.
Okay.
Than, say, commercial. Commercial could trigger its own.
But you're also saying the statute would need more changes than just removing the opt-out or
Correct.
opt-in?
The Representative Reedy's amendment, in my opinion, didn't quite go far enough.
Okay.
And the reason is because the way it's calculated now is it's still based on the aggregate of all of it.
Okay.
The rates are. Yes, they can be different, but they can be adjusted, but according to the aggregate.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
I think it does, yeah, thank you. And the only other thing I wanted to add, I'm very sensitive to this, so I just want to say, a little bit ago, you mentioned that even though an assessment may go up quite a bit, Hancock's going to protect our taxpayers, and this year it would be at 2.9%, but that's not protecting individual taxpayers. We could have one person's assessment grow at a much higher rate. They are going to have more than 2.9% likely.
And I think there's been conversation that our proposal is looking at Hancock directly, but that may be massaged to include more consideration for individual properties. I think earlier in some of the meetings, one of the representatives had discussed individual, closer to looking at individual.
So you're saying that's a recommendation that you're having to make it more individualized?
And I would also add to that, if you go to the individual level, we will start seeing disparity, which gets into fair and equitable. So, I mean, our goal is to equalize assessments between counties and within the counties, so that causes a problem. That's why it's designed the way it is to begin with.
Yeah, okay. I would agree with you. Thank you.
Representative Van Squake, you're recognized to inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. Glad to see you all again.
Good evening, sir.
I missed the last meeting, but I did watch. I did hear your remarks concerning the ombudsman. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I heard you talk about looking at the role of the ombudsman, trying to decide what that should be. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I hope you will take a special note of 130.435, which does delineate a good part of the role of the ombudsman. May not completely delineate the role, but it gives us a good framework to work from, I think.
And I agree, and we have put Dan, our legislative guy, in charge of enumerating those responsibilities and putting together a package on what that position is going to look like in more detail. We're not waiting until next session or anything. We're focused on making the ombudsman real position as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much, very much.
We want to help the taxpayer. I mean, and again, it's not about holding their hand. We want tools, and one of those tools is investigative tools so that, now we've had a taxpayer tell us, we want to know what the assessor used in their comps to determine the value. one of the problems that the taxpayer has is getting an appraised value. That costs more than what it was worth their time. And so that impedes them from really appealing the process. And so if some of that data could be made available, I mean, if the assessors already put some comps together, information together, have access to it so that they can say, okay, I see why you assess my property to this, it would save a lot of time and money.
Certainly could, absolutely. Next question on original assessment. Representative Steinhoff had a few questions on that. I've got some more. It's my understanding, you say you value the company and then you apply that portion that's applicable to Missouri and then divide that out by the counties. Is that how you do that?
Correct. I mean, for example, if United Airlines flies 1 million miles across the country and we determine from the information provided that they do 100,000, then that percentage of United is what gets charged to them for Missouri taxes, and then we disseminate that out to counties that are affected by it.
Okay, so you're valuing the whole company, is that right?
Yes.
You're valuing Blue Sky then, in other words, as well?
I know it's based upon their book value, so I would say that there is some Blue Sky in there, yes.
Yeah, okay, so I guess my question here is, it seems to me that our property taxes are on property, on real estate and personal property, and that Blue Sky really doesn't fall under either of those.
Well, it's called unitary assessment process. It's a little bit different, but we use a cost approach, a sales approach, and the book approach. I mean, we try to look at all facets of the business when we determine the assessed value on the property.
Okay. If you could send me some more information on that, I'd appreciate that.
I'd be happy to.
If you could do that, thank you. Next thing about compliance. I heard Representative Keithley say something about we don't want to make Jackson County the new normal, and I agree with that, but my understanding of compliance, the way I read the Constitution on it, is that compliance is uniform upon the same class or subclass of subjects within the territorial limits of the authority levying the tax. So Jackson County would not be compared to third-class counties, would it?
No, it would not.
Third-class counties would be compared to third-class counties, is that correct?
They would be compared within themselves. I mean, the assessed value, the market study, the ratio study is all based upon their data within their county.
Within their county only?
Yes.
And not compared to any other county?
Correct.
That's interesting to know. Okay. I was not aware of that. Okay. So, so your compliance studies are done. So if a county doesn't have a lot of sales, let's take Worth County. Less than 2,000 people, small county, probably doesn't have a lot of sales in here. How do you come up with what the 100% ratio is for Worth County?
There's the cost approach, the measuring of the home and determining what the price per square foot to build the home would be.
Okay. And if their assessor used that same approach in valuation, would they likely come up with a similar value for those properties?
That's the hope and desire, yes.
That would be my hope and desire as well. I'd love to see us get away from market value and go to, or market approach and go to the cost approach, especially in our small counties. I think it would be easier to do. Even with COV, in a small county like that, you're not going to have enough sales to determine a market.
And you're probably, on small counties like that, you'll probably still need to do a blended discovery, the sales plus the cost method.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You bet. Representative Job, I still haven't seen you on the end down there. You're recognized to inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a couple things that we've talked about thus far that I wanted to kind of get a little bit more information on or circle back on. We've had some discussion about compliance and how many counties were out of compliance, and some discussion about over-assessments and if that was a thing that we were dealing with. At least my understanding of the whole MOU conversation that has got started this last time was the State Tax Commission basically looked across the board, and if you were under 80%, you're supposed to be between 90 and 110, but if you were under 80, then you were out of compliance, and you had that MOU conversation.
Correct. And it's 85%.
85%, sorry. So,
Well, and the MOU is based upon the maintenance plan. I want to make sure that's understood. The foundation of what we work with is the maintenance plan that every 2 years is created between the local assistance department and the assessor.
okay.
And then the MOU is a reminder of where they are in relationship to their market study ratio.
Okay. So, but you did that market study ratio for all of the counties
Yes.
across the state. I would just ask, did you notice, I mean, did you have a bunch of them that were over 100, 110%?
No, sir. None.
Okay, so at least from your perspective, you found none that were on the aggregate overassessed.
Correct.
And we've talked a little bit about the property abatements. It's been mentioned at least a little bit, and how that goes into the calculation. We've had the discussion about breaking down into subclass to kind of avoid the crossover where residential or commercial or agriculture want, because it's an aggregate, it stops them from triggering the Hancock rollback. In jurisdictions that have a large amount of abated properties, either in residential or commercial or wherever it is, can you explain to me how that gets calculated in terms of their compliance, or if there would be rollbacks? I guess my question is, if I can abate, if I'm a county and I abate, say, 25% of the residential properties in my jurisdiction, does that pull the average down overall so that I don't trigger Hancock?
I won't mention any county's name, but there was several counties that, again, given the opportunity, our local assistants will sit down with the assessor. They had a neighborhood that was 90+% in value. And so our original request was for them to go up 15%. But once we sit down with that assessor and realize we can't raise that neighborhood by 15% because they're at 90, then overall the net result was, instead of being increased by 14.99%, it ended up being around 12%. We do take those things into consideration given the opportunity. What is the makeup of your county? And based upon that makeup, if a particular neighborhood is in compliance or is at the proper market value, then we only want to focus on the ones that are not. And so we try very hard to do that with each county.
Okay, and are you aware, I guess the other question of if the property abatements will actually end up pulling down your aggregate increase for the Hancock purposes?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I'll have to do a little more research on the abatement terminology there.
Right, thank you. And then I wanted to touch back on the parcel fee. I'm at least familiar within Jackson County. I think the parcel fee works out to about $1 million based on the properties in Jackson County. Do you know or have a ballpark for what that parcel fee represents as far as statewide? Like, what's the actual cost?
It's $11 million.
11 million? So it's currently $11 million out of GR to fund it at the $3.30.
Correct.
Okay.
Our total budget's $14 million. We use $3 million for our operation within our office.
Okay.
Anything more, Representative?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, you bet. Representative Harbison, you're recognized to inquire.
First of all, more of a statement than an inquiry. First of all, I want to thank you guys for traveling to Everett. I mean, you didn't have to, and you did, and you sat through long meetings like us. But I have some concerns getting back to the mine issue. Number one, I'm kind of, I'm over a barrel in the sense there's 1,200 jobs that company provides in that area that I couldn't replace. So that's one issue. I mean, those jobs send kids to school, buy houses. But I have a problem. I hope this don't set a precedent. I have two other major companies that provide a lot of jobs that pay their taxes faithfully every year. So with the rulings and everything in favor of Doe Run, I hope this don't set a precedent, not only in my district, but across the state where, because if it does, what it does, it puts the burden back on mom and pop. And their pockets ain't deep enough to cover what we're losing there, when they consistently challenge their taxes. So I hope in the future, number one, that they pay their fair share. Like I said, but I hope it don't set a precedent and get into other situations where large companies just automatically, from this ruling and from the precedents that's been set, I hope they don't just fall in line and we see this over and over and over again. Like I said, in your particular situation, it had to be tough, but when you're appointed to a position and you've been a former legislator, that's liable to happen, in any of the appointed positions. So I think that really needs to be taken into consideration in the future as well. But I do thank you for your travel. Thank you for your commitment. And, hopefully this won't become a bigger issue.
Thank you, and I guarantee you that we will look at each assessment on its own merits.
Any other questions? Representative Reedy, let me rephrase that. Co-Chair Reedy, you are recognized for an inquiry. It's a good thing that wasn't a bucket, Representative. Yeah, kicked the bucket.
That's all right. Thank you all for being here tonight. I appreciate it. I wanted to talk a little bit, and I know you all deal with assessments. You really don't deal with the tax setting the levies. You don't deal with sales tax. You don't have any control over sales tax. You just do property assessments. Is that right?
Correct.
But I wanted to talk about something that happened in a school district that's really pretty close to me, not in my district. I used to represent them, but something that happened this last week. I'm not a big fan of social media, and I don't live by, it's not my Bible, and I don't believe everything, but there was an outcry there because what the school district did, if I'm right on this, I'm pretty sure, they went up 11% on residential. And so they raised the assessments 11%. Well, they got ready to set their levy. They needed to roll their levy back so many cents. Well, what they did in turn, they added that amount of money to their debt service because they said that, well, they had to dip in their reserves last year to service their debt. I don't know. But anyway, this was proposed by the school superintendent there. They had a board meeting the other night. They had a packed house because they let people know what was going on. One of the first times at these public meetings that they saw crowds of people come out to talk about this. In the end, to make a long story short, I guess, the school board went ahead and approved raising that debt service levy up because they weren't at their ceiling. So now those folks this year will pay the same total levy on their property, and it's going to be 11% tax increase on everybody in that district. And I know you all don't set the levy, but what can be done? What would you suggest to us? You've been around a long time, kind of like I have, but you've done more things. What should this committee do to kind of combat this kind of thing? Because when that assessor put out hey, I'm raising your values, but the levy should roll back, and the district turns right around and raises that debt service amount, the exact amount, so to the point four after the decimal, those folks, he was put in a position of, in good faith, he told his people that it shouldn't affect him that way, but it's going to.
Well, and I appreciate that story, and that's, you're right. Our responsibility is assessment, but we hear the cry of the assessors. They feel handcuffed in doing their job because as soon as they put assessments at their true value and the levies aren't rolled back as they should to protect, Hancock was meant to protect the taxpayer. And I think there's a strong sense that it's not doing what it was intended to do. And so I think there's some details within it that needs to be addressed to protect the taxpayer and protect the assessor from being the bad guy.
Would, if, like when they rolled their debt service levy went down last year, if that would become their new ceiling, wouldn't that keep them from being able to roll it back, go up higher than that new ceiling?
I'm not prepared to answer that. I don't know that well.
I'm not sure on that myself.
I'm just curious of what we can do, but I know there's it's the biggest city in the district I used to represent, and it's been quite a stir in the community because of that, and it's not right, but it did put your assessor there, or their assessor that's under your direction, in the position of telling people, you know, hey, it's going to roll back, so this won't hit you that hard, but it's going to. And so I just wanted to bring that up and see if you had some solutions, I think we need to address it as a committee to try to keep those things from happening.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. For the 5th time, we have one more to go. Hope to see you there. It's closer to home. Thank you for coming and being here to hear what the folks had to say.
It's been our, I guess, really honored to be here, to be part of the process. We want to be part of the solution. Anything we can help with, we're here to help.
Thank you very much. Folks, thanks for coming to this meeting. Macon, thanks for being a gracious host. We appreciate it. Having said that, the meeting is adjourned.
You don't think I'm ready?